Well, hello, everybody. This is Tim Green with Rattle Magazine. Welcome to Rattlecast number 140. So glad you could join me on this special time. We actually have 13 people already here on YouTube and a couple dozen or so people on Facebook right away, which is good. I was a little worried about this special time, but because Easter was yesterday, we couldn't do a show on Easter Sunday morning. So we switched it to Monday, and I'm so glad you could find me. Now, today's guest is Kate Gale. She'll be joining us in about a half an hour. We have a couple guests lined up for the first half hour, but before we begin, I should say that Rattle is a publication of the Rattle Foundation, a 501c3 nonprofit working to promote the practice of poetry. We've been in continuous publication since 1995 and are unaffiliated with any other organization. We just do this because we love poetry, and I know you do too, so please do click the like button, share, subscribe, click the bell for notifications, leave a review. Whatever you can do to help spread poetry on the internet is much appreciated. Now, to start with, we have Sunday's poet with us, which would normally be happening on Sunday, but now with a special episode, it's a day after the fact. But this is Richard Westheimer, of course, as most viewers know. And his poem this week was "The Miracle of Naming." And here he is, Richard Westheimer. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
Hey Tim, I'm doing great. Really delighted to be here.
Yeah, it's good to see. I mean, like I mentioned on an email, like you send one or often two really good poems every week. So it's sort of it's tough knowing which poem is the one to pick. But this is a great one, and it felt really honest and sort of complete and from the heart, which is what I loved about it. And people have loved it too online. So do you want to explain what the topic is? A very sad story that you were writing about.
Yeah, well, first I'll say I was very uncertain about this poem, as I wrote to you about, but when I reread it, through other people's eyes, I really grew to appreciate it differently than when I first sent it off to you. So the root of the story was brought to me by my wife, Debbie, who's sort of my writing partner, and um, um, she said, "Do you know about this trans woman who was murdered in Vermont, which is where my daughter lives and has been very active as a community organizer in the LGBTQ community?" And I didn't. I looked it up, and I was immediately struck by her name, Fern Feather, which in a former life might have struck me as being sort of like overly, cute. But I just loved it, and I thought about this woman and feathers, and anyway, her story is tragic in that she was murdered clearly for being a her in what appeared to be perhaps a trans body. And one of the things I did was I looked up to see, is it true that murders of trans people are proportionally greater than not? And it's incredibly, like, 4 times as much. So I saw her name Fern Feather and thought of Icarus, and the poems just started unfolding from there.
Yeah. Well, do you want to go ahead and read it? This is The Miracle of Naming.
I will. One other thing
Yeah.
I did note in my um, um, uh, poet statement about supporting an organization that supports LGBTQ folks in Vermont, and the one that I'm going to send my Poets Response stipend check to is called Out in the Open,
Yeah. And
who
yeah, the website there is
directly support,
weareoutintheopen.org.
right, and they directly support rural LGBTQ
Mm-hmm.
folks, which is an underserved group. So I'll go ahead and read the poem.
Okay.
Um, it's called "The Miracle of Naming." When I read of the murdered woman, Fern Feather, I thought of the myth of Icarus, because Fern had wings too, or at least feathers, although hers were ones she'd grown herself, were not sewn by some other. She'd discovered a way through the labyrinth of her man's body, found Ariadne's string of coming out, and followed it, blinked back tears in the bright outside, was greeted as a kind of light, as a hot woman who warmed the world, until some guy she knew put a knife in her for being a her. When I asked my daughter Fern's preferred pronouns. Many, all, she said, multitudes. I thought a miracle of naming. I go for a walk outside where impossible dandelions push through the pavement of our lane. They somehow have survived the crush of cars and me walking from here to the mailbox and back. Their butter yellow is splashed with muddy pothole water. Their leaves bruised but still feeding the roots they've put down. No one welcomes these blossoms, and some neighbors would have me poison the ones that thrive here and in the yard. I've been slow to appreciate them myself, some days digging them out with a spiked tool, others sitting beside them, listening to them whisper their rugged stories, how they've been around since before my kind created time. I go back inside, call my daughter again, ask about her coming out, ask about Fern, talk about the world of spiked tools and poison and naming. She tells me of all the blossoms in her crushed world and all the impossible buds that will push through and bloom again, and the one who won't. Her partner joins the call, shows me the brisket they are preparing for Seder, tells me these tough cuts of meat take time. I savor that they prepare such a fine meal together. And even though I am vegetarian, I ask for the recipe.
Yeah, there's a beautiful poem and great metaphors throughout that too. The Miracle of Naming, Richard Westheimer. Thanks so much for sharing that and for joining us today. And maybe we'll see you later on the open lines too.
Yeah, I'll be around. Okay, thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Dick.
Bye.
Bye. Yeah, so it was Richard Westheimer with The Miracle of Naming. And as we mentioned, you can go, if you want to find a way to help, you can go to the website, which is at the bottom of the link. We are out in the open.org is the website that he suggests going to support rural LGBTQ people in Vermont. So do check that out. And of course, the story of Fern and what happened to her. And now we're going to switch to we're going to try a new segment on the show, which I've been meaning to do for a while. But George Bilgere was a guest on Rattle number 38 way back 2 years ago. And he has a new book out now, Central Air. And so we thought we'd bring him on for a brief segment to just talk about his new book and share a little bit from that. And here he is, George Bilgere. Hey, George, how you doing?
Here I am. Hey, Tim. So good to see you. Wait, you mean the last time I think I was on the show like a year ago, right?
No, it was the year that felt like two. It was actually 2 years to the day almost. It was April 21st, 2020. So the lockdown had just started. And if I remember right, you were talking about how nice the familial bonding was, for that month where, you got to spend time together in a way that we didn't before. So little did we know that it would last 2 years and we'd still be kind of creeping our way out of it. How has the 2 years been since?
What was then familial bonding is now get me out of here. No, it's been a great 2 years since last we talked. Although I must tell you, I am coming to you from Cleveland, Ohio, and it is snowing rather heavily right now.
Oh wow, really?
That it's mid-April. This is April is indeed the cruelest month. Anyway, happy National Poetry Month, Tim.
Yes.
And check this out.
Yeah, it's a beautiful book. I have a copy right here.
Coolest cover. The cover is done by originally a Cleveland artist. What you're seeing is a kind of fisheye view of Cleveland buildings with the title of the poem in the very middle, Central Air. It's a Cleveland artist named Amy Casey, whose work is just fantastic. So I'm so privileged and honored to have her work on the cover. Yeah, the book came out a few weeks ago. And for the first time in 2 years, I've been out on the road promoting the book. I just got back from Corpus Christi, Texas, and I'm going to be going to New York, and I'm going to be going to Pittsburgh and various other spots. So it's all of us poets just sat around twiddling our thumbs for 2 years, and now we're out again. And it's really been so exciting and so much fun to be, I don't know, on on the poetry road again.
Yeah. How have the audiences been? Have people been sort of extra excited to get out, or does it feel sort of back to normal, like the crazy 2 years never happened?
No, they're extra excited.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, I've got a little bit of a cold. They're really extra excited to be out. I mean, the idea, look, Zoom is great, and it was a wonderful thing that technology could kind of get us through that period. But people, whoever the poet is, they're just happy to be at the bookshop, at the college, at whatever reading venue it is, talking to each other and having coffee and going out for a beer after the reading. It's really an exciting time. So long may it last. I mean, may this be permanent. I certainly hope so.
For sure, yeah.
And yeah, it's always good to have a new book.
So do you want to read a poem from it? I think we'll read 2 poems, maybe one, then we'll talk about the book a little, and then we'll read another poem. That's
great. Thanks, Tim. I'm going to read a poem from the book called Anna Karenina. I was raised by a single mom. My dad died when I was about 10, and my mother was faced with raising 3 kids. She was a nurse, and she worked these long shifts, but she also had a passion for reading great literature. She loved to read these great old novels. And a couple of years ago, I remember her reading Anna Karenina. So a couple of years ago, I had never read the novel. So I read Anna Karenina, and I thought, this is a weird thing because I'm taking a journey my mom took so many years ago through this fantastic novel. And I wrote a poem. It's for my mom, Ruth Bilgere, Anna Karenina. My mother was long dead before I was old enough to ask her who she was. But I'm reading Anna Karenina, which I recall her burning through late nights after a double shift, after the insertion of suppositories and the emptying of bedpans, after she fried us up some pork chops and opened a can of applesauce and a can of hominy and a can of fruit cocktail. She would sit down with her cigarettes and red wine and read these big novels that took her away from thinking all day about money and into whatever Emma Bovary or Eleanor Dashwood was dealing with. She disappeared into French winters. She walked down London streets or sat quietly with Anna in her parlor. I look around in the novel for her cigarettes tonight, her glass of wine, anything she might have left behind.
That was Anna Karenina from Central Air, which you can see on the screen right here. George's new book of poems from Pitt Press. Tell me about the title, George. It was one of those books where the poems feel like little anecdotes from different areas. The interesting thing is the pandemic kind of feels like it runs through in the background of it. It feels like a sort of reminisce about the regular world or something as we're all sort of, as time slows down a little bit. That's kind of felt for me. But so what was it? Why did you pick this? There's a poem in there called Central Air, but why did you pick the title of the book?
Well, because that poem, Central Air, deals with some neighbors down the street. Cleveland is hot and steamy and sultry in the summer, and a lot of people have central air. Those great big machines you install next to your house that keeps your house going kind of like a refrigerator all summer. And to me, that kind of spoke of the pandemic. Using central air and staying in the house all summer, isolated from the rest of the world, was so characteristic of who we were for a year or even 2, sort of locked by technology into our safe little bubbles. and I also like the title just because I like the poem, but I like the title for a book title because it suggests when you speak a poem, when you read a poem, it exists in the air, right? The vibrations of the air. And I wanted to say, rather with a kind of ironic grandiosity, hey, these poems are some central air. This is crucial at this time to hear these poems. And it just looked great on the cover. So that's why I picked, here's some central air for you, some central vibrations. And one of the poems that I like most in the collection, now that I'm a dad, one of the world's oldest, relatively new dads, there are a number of poems in the collection about my kids. And one of the poems that I like most, I want to read for you now. And there is, it takes place at our local Cleveland public pool. And there's a word in the poem that maybe some listeners should know. The word is Phidian, Phidian. It refers to a Greek sculptor named Phidias, who was renowned for the beauty and delicacy of his sculptures of the human head. The poem is called The Scar, and any parent here can connect with this poem.
What page is it on? Oh, here it is, 16.
Oh, sorry. It's on page 16.
Okay.
My son slipped on the ladder to the pool and smacked his head, blood pooling on his small shoulders, the doctor stitching him whole. 3 years on, after a haircut, the scar still rises. A quarter moon, a woman will ask about as they lie there one night, her fingers in his hair, her voice in his ear, the secret delight of him, a bit like burnt toast in her nostrils as she takes his strangeness into her. What she won't know is how the frail Phidian skull I held that day in my hands resounded on the hot concrete. It echoed all summer, less like an egg cracking in a bowl or a world breaking than the wild beating of love against my heart. Dear girl who will one day win him, that part of the boy is mine.
Yeah, two great poems. Thanks for sharing these and this wonderful book. I'm just, I always get copies of books in the mail. I'm privileged in that way. And it was really wonderful to see this book and read through it. The interesting thing, too, is that I think we published 4 or 5 poems in here in Rattle, but they were all from submissions where you'd sent 4 or 5. So a lot of the poems, and they're all good. I love all your work. So a lot of the poems I'd read one time as a submission and picking other poems and then got to reread them again. And it's a wonderful book. I noticed on the back you don't mention the radio show anymore. Do you still do the radio show?
I still do the radio show. I just neglected to mention it, but I still have a radio show called Wordplay that I do with my wonderful partner, John Donahue. And you can, if listeners to this show, viewers to this show, were to Google wjcu.org, you could find out when to listen to Wordplay, which has been a really fun project for me for the past dozen years or so. So please tune in. John and I read our favorite poems by poets, around the country. Mm-hmm. Usually poems that we call radio ready, poems that work on the radio. So wjcu.org Wordplay. So thanks for giving me a chance to plug the show.
Yeah, for sure. I've loved listening to it. And then you kind of forget to listen to things, and it's good to have a reminder. But I can't help but ask now, what makes a poem radio worthy? Like, what are the characteristics of a radio worthy poem?
Well, it has to be a poem. Here's what as someone who hosts a radio show and has done so for many years, my greatest fear is the listener's hand moving toward the dial to turn it. And I want to read poems that are undial turnable, right? You're thinking, wow, I'm not such a poetry fan, but this is a really cool poem and it's really interesting. You have to be able to get it at some level immediately, you know? And you and I both know lots of poets whose work is not accessible on a first reading or a second reading, or indeed on maybe any reading. And those poems, which may be marvelous poems, they don't work on the radio. So it's got to be poems that will grab. I envision my listener as somebody speeding across Cleveland in their car thinking, yeah, that's pretty cool. And radio is just a perfect medium for poetry.
It really is. Do you think about doing it? Is there like a podcast version? Do you put it out as a podcast? Because that's sort of the way it works now.
Starting this year, we're going to do a podcast to the show. It's about time.
So very good. Well, I'm glad to hear that. And thanks for joining us today, George, and for sharing poems from this great book. Hope everybody picks up a copy. And it's good to see you again.
One last thing, Tim.
Yeah, go ahead.
All your viewers, Tim Green is the hardest working poetry guy in America and has done so much for poets in this country. And I just want you to know you're an amazing guy, an amazing editor. So thank you for everything you've done, Tim.
Well, thanks, George. I really appreciate that. Coming from you, that means especially a lot because I'm a huge fan. So thanks a lot, George.
Yes. Bye.
Yep, take care. Okay, and that was George Bilgere once again with Central Air, his newest book. And you can check out more at georgebilgere.com. It's spelled like it is on the title of the book here. George Bilgere, George Bilgere, George Bilgere is how to spell it. That is George Bilgere. Central Air is his newest book. And now we have about I don't know, we're waiting for Kate Gale to come. She couldn't make it until the 1/2 mark. She's a very busy woman publishing a small press and her own poetry as well, and being a professor too. So let's see. I thought maybe I would share this poem. It is tax day, and I hate that I have to read it myself. I thought we had audio before pulling it up because it's a little bit long. But this is one of our every time that it's tax day, every year, this poem sort of goes slightly viral on YouTube or on Facebook or Twitter or somewhere, and we get a lot of new hits. And this is John Brehm's poem, "Dear Internal Revenue Service." So let's read that now, and we'll share it with you. Luckily, that I got my taxes done. Hope you did too, because today is the deadline, April 18th this year, in the United States anyway. And here is this. Let me fix this. Okay, so here is John Brehm, "Dear Internal Revenue Service. Thank you for your letter informing me of the errors in my 2005 filing. I'm enclosing a check for $5,657 to cover the tax, which I evidently still owe, and the interest on that tax. I hereby like to ask, however, that you forgive the penalty of $1,136, since the employer failed to send me a 1099 for the income I made as a consultant that year. Of course, I realize it's my responsibility to report all my income, but in the absence of a 1099, I simply forgot. I have a number of clients, and I'm obviously not the best bookkeeper, nor am I particularly good with money. I am a poet as well as a freelance writer, and being a poet isn't quite as lucrative as you might imagine. You may notice, for example, that for all of last year, I received $57 in royalties. A friend of mine helpfully observed that I could have made more money as a parking meter, to which I replied that I could have made a lot more money as a parking meter and gotten a lot more respect as well. Unlike most hard-working poets in America, I don't teach, mainly because I don't know anything. I'm probably not all that far from the cliched notion of the romantic poet you yourself may hold. I get stoned sometimes and stare at trees and clouds for hours on end, try to see the wind, etc. I weep for no reason, remember real or imagined slights for ages, and lick my wounds with words. I live in a studio apartment, a garret, if you will. I have a large desk. It's like the deck of a ship, and I, its landlocked captain, gazing out to sea. It sits underneath my sleeping loft, which my girlfriend likes to call the lofty loft, for reasons I won't go into here, as they may seem inappropriate, or too personal, or perhaps irrelevant to my purpose, which is to ask your forgiveness of the penalty and to offer reasons why by explaining the hardships of the poet's life. I'll just say that sometimes it gets pretty lofty up there, and sometimes we imagine we're on a magic carpet drifting smoothly above the city below, in its state of semi-controlled slow-motion collapse, and on out over the ocean, which she loves and fears just like I do, or over the summer campy Catskills, where we can't afford to buy a country house, with her worn-down mountains and charmingly self-effacing trees, so unlike the impossibly massive and overly serious cedars and hemlocks and Douglas fir trees of the Pacific Northwest, where I used to live until poverty forced me east. Those trees are brooders, dignified, mist-shrouded monsters, beautiful, of course, and awe-inspiring. I wonder if you have felt this, but too damply archaic and imposing and incomprehensible for my taste. I like a tree you can take in with a single steady gaze. I wonder if you are as bad at poetry as I am at accounting. Perhaps we are the inverted mirror images of each other. I don't imagine you get asked that question very often or receive many letters like this one. Maybe you're reading this out loud, even now, to your office, I almost said cell mates. Of my book, a reviewer once said that one simply can't resist reading these poems out loud to someone else, and I wonder if you feel like this, the irresistible need to read this poem aloud. I'm sure the letters you received are mostly angry ones, the kind that say things like, "Here, take my goddamn money and buy Dick Cheney a few more gallons of puppy blood for his nightly ablutions," or, "Dear IRS, please use the enclosed check to purchase some handheld rocket launchers to blast the fuck out of some poor Iraqi's house, which you prefer to call a suspected insurgent stronghold." Or, "Please give this money to the CEO of Exxon so we can buy silk socks while I regurgitate my supper and try not to starve." I thought of taking that approach. I felt the desire to get in a shot or two, to give voice to righteous indignation, treat you like a non-person, someone mindlessly and heartlessly saying no all day long. But I'm done with all that. I want to reach you, to speak to you as a fellow human being immersed in the same joys and suffering as I am. Didn't you once write poems yourself, poems of anguish and loss and loneliness? And to remind you of the karmic delights of forgiveness that await you if you release me from this debt. So that was John Brehm's poem, Dear Internal Revenue Service, from Rattle number 30. And it was a Rattle Poetry Prize honorable mention. Back in the day, we called them honorable mentions instead of finalists. And then everybody was calling them finalists anyway, and so we switched to finalists. But that was John Brehm with, I think, the best tax poem I can remember reading. And let's see, what else should we do? We're waiting for Kate. And let's see. Let's do another random poem. Let's play. This is Here by Rhina P. Espaillat. And again, I have to read it. But here we go. Rhina P. Espaillat, of course, she was on Rattlecast maybe around, I don't know what that was. I guess it would have been maybe 50 or so. Just wonderful poet. One of my favorite people in all of poetry and one of the best formal writers. And she was writing a bunch of poems at this point after her husband died. And I think that's what this one's about. This is Here. I'll read her note first. What a comfort to believe, as the romantics seem to, that shared settings and common possessions are somehow sympathetic and attuned to our losses. But the experience of, for example, widowhood forces us to acknowledge an internal solitude, a human absence that only sentient beings can understand or allay. And so here is her poem Here. Here, by Rhina P. Espaillat. Here. Everything's here, unused but orderly, as if ready for use. A mint or two, his nail clipper, the little scissors he trimmed his mustache with, scribbled things to do, his watch, a neatly folded handkerchief that spills a scattering of change, the pen that leaked into his pocket now and then. Almost hear him now, don't touch, as if I were pilfering his tangled hearing aids. This snarl of keys, his red Swiss Army knife hiding its tiny arsenal of blades like legs tucked under. Glasses, wallet, wife, each item's here, though useless as it is, I don't know why, except that it was his. That is Rhina P. Espaillat. Maybe along those lines, maybe we should read another one of those that was from the same time. This is the sharpened shears he plied. And this is the same time. Might even have the same note or be from the same issue. I'm not sure. The sharpened shears he plied. The sharpened shears he plied hang useless on the wall. Oh, wait, she can read this one. Let her read this one. This is Rhina P. Espaillat reading it for herself.
The sharpened shears he plied. The sharpened shears he plied hang useless on the wall now that he's gone away, almost as if they sense and mourn the difference. The shrubs he used to trim have swelled, shapeless and dense, and weeds he kept at bay, creeper, tendril, and limb, run rampant through the fence. But no, tools don't recall the gardener who died, and these green things don't care. No thing remembers him. How difficult to bear.
And that was Rhina P. Espaillat reading The Sharpened Shears He Plied. And let's see. Well, we might just have to sit around sharing poems, because I'm not sure where Kate is. Let's see. But there's a lot of poems. There are a lot of great poems in Rattle. Let's see. She hasn't emailed me. Sorry, this is the kind of stuff that George Bilgere would be terrified about on his radio show, having dead air and silence. Just making sure Kate hasn't emailed. I don't know if I have her phone number. So we'll do another poem or two, and then if she doesn't come yet, we'll open up the lines, I guess, and do open lines first and see if Kate appears later. Here is another poem from the Random Button. I just love the Random Button. And this is a Poetry Spawn poem that popped up. And interestingly, relevant to what's happened now. This is a year ago, February 7th. But this is Navalny, a poem. And here is Liya Akoury's note. I wrote this poem in response to Alexei Navalny's conviction at the Moscow Kangaroo Court. His stoicism and caustic humor have long been his signature qualities. But that day, we got to see another side of him. Watching him fight back tears as he looked at his wife one last time broke us, broke me in a whole new way. And I wonder what's up, if there's any resolution to that since then. This was February 7th, 2021, so a year and a couple of months ago. This is Navalny.
Navalny. He said, "Come outside." We did. The snow was ankle deep and fine as flour. "Come out." It made a most satisfying sound underfoot. "Come." The frigid wind was sharp on the small square of skin around the eyes, between the fur hat and the face mask. We marched, calling for his freedom, arrested by the thousands. He said, "Don't be afraid." He said, "The man hides in his bunker. He's no scarier than this frost." He said, "Our people know how to dress for winter." He said, "Come out, friends." He said, "Your Honor, please don't interrupt. Instead, look at the man within these robes and be ashamed. Look at the circus of a courtroom. Look at me laughing so that I don't cry." He said, "Will no one meet my eyes?" He stood, his smile defiant, and with his piercing gaze traced every face inside that room, and found his wife's, and struggled not to weep.
Yeah, and once again, that was Navalny by Liya Akoury, a Poetry Spawn poem from about a year ago. So Kate Gale is here, so I'm going to jump to a break, and we will be right back once we get connected and make sure everything works. So hang on, hold tight, and I will be right back. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Kate Gale is here. Kate Gale is co-founder and managing editor of Red Hen Press, editor of the Los Angeles Review, and teaches in the Low Residency MFA Program at the University of Nebraska in poetry, fiction, creative, nonfiction, and in the Ashland, Ohio MFA Program. She's also author of 7 books of poetry, including The Goldilocks Zone from the University of New Mexico Press in 2014, and Echo Light from Red Mountain in 2014, and 6 librettos, including Rio de Sangre, a libretto for an opera with composer Don Davis, which had its world premiere in 2010. Her newest book, The Loneliest Girl, was just published again by University of New Mexico Press, and here she is, Kate Gale. Hey, Kate, how you doing?
Pretty good. Good to see you, Tim.
Yeah, it's been a while. I think we had an event like a few months before the whole lockdown thing, and then I haven't seen you since. So it's really good to see you, and I've seen that Red Hen Press is thriving with all the things you do online and in the video shows you have like this, the readings that you've done online. It's cool to see you.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, our nimble staff have been doing great work, and I'm very glad to be working with them. You know, obviously you've met Toby and Monica, and they're terrific.
Yeah, you just always have an outstanding staff. It's really great. I mean, it's one of the best things about Red Hen Press. It's just the interns you have are great, and then you have a full staff that's great. And I always am sending people your way because people ask me if I could have an intern, if they could have an intern. And I say, well, we're not really. It's not a fun environment for you sitting in my living room, but for Red Hen Press maybe. So maybe apply there. But anyway, do you want to start out? The Loneliest Girl is your newest book. I'll put it on screen so everybody can see the beautiful cover. I love this cover. Do you want to start out reading a poem from the book?
Sure. I'm going to start with the opening poem of the book. It's called There Are 10 Things You Need to Know to Be a Woman, and this is based on the 10 commandments in Hamilton, which was based on the 10 commandments of crack. When you're young and the little boys say, "Let me see you pee," you need to say no. They want to see under your dress. Bad things can happen. They come for you. When you're in school and the other girls laugh at you because you're dressed like a half-wit, don't expect your mama to care. She'll laugh with her sisters, with her mother. They'll all laugh at you. They are laughing right now. They come for you. When you grow breasts and the boys say they just want to look at them, they don't mean it. They mean they want you to undress. They mean they want to have sex with you and then with someone else and then with someone else and then with someone else. They will tell everyone how easily you slipped off your blouse, unhooked your bra, stepped out of your skirt. You thought it was love. They thought you were easy pickings. They come for you. In college at the parties, if you have a drink and then another, his penis will slip inside you. And if you have had too many drinks, so many penises will slip inside you. It will be a party of penises inside you, a memory of penises, a throwdown of penises. And you will try to stand afterward. You will try to walk. You will hear them laughing. They come for you. You move to another state and start over. You date doctors and lawyers. You are taken to the country club where the fancy men put their hands on you. They take you to high-rise hotels where they grope you in exchange for dinner. You put out. You are popular. They come for you. You get a job. You ask the women at your company to help you. You want help meeting important people, making connections. The women will not help you with anything. They sew the scarlet A to your blouse. They come for you. You get married and then you get a divorce. You hope the women will invite you over to meet their single friends. They do not want you alone with their husbands. They don't trust you with their boyfriends. When you try to talk with their men, they come for you. The only way you could avoid attention is to get fat, but you live in a city where fat is not permitted. For a few years, you let yourself get a little bit fat and you have a few more friends. You have a fat boyfriend. Then you join a gym and lose weight. The women turn on you. They come for you. You could become religious, talk to God, become a Jesus lover or a God follower, and there in church, maybe the other women would like you. The other men would assume you aren't about sex. Don't people pretty much stop having sex once they join a church? You attend church one Sunday, everyone can see you are a fake. They come for you. You are a motherfucking skinny ass bitch. You stomped around the world in your life building castles. You painted the sky and planted trees. You have broken the goddamn rules, and when they wrote new ones, you broke those. You are out of control. You are the wild New Testament of women. You are breaking the 11th commandment, which is, thou shalt not speak if thou art a woman. You are speaking in your dirty boots without shame. Where is your shame, woman? Where is your shame? Why do you not hang your head, woman? They come for you. They come for you. They come for you.
Yeah, and that was the opening poem. There are 10 things you need to know to be a woman, from Kate Gale's newest book, The Loneliest Girl. Can you explain, Kate, the sort of the central metaphor for the book, which is a really the whole book is sort of a extended metaphor using the Medusa and other Greek figures. So can you tell about the concept of the book and how it came to be?
So I became very interested in the idea of shaming. I have had my own experiences with shaming, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that shaming is a very much a female experience. I thought about how many of my students used to talk about the walk of shame, mm-hmm. that whole idea of the walk of shame. And then the more I kept thinking about shame, I thought about how in both the Bible and in Greek myths, women are supposed to carry quite a lot of shame. And so I wanted to weave in both the biblical idea of shame, but very much the Greek idea of shame that women are supposed to carry. And there's so many things we're supposed to be ashamed for, or ashamed of. Our bodies primarily. And the sad thing about being ashamed of your body is you live in it. You can't get away from it. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, anything sexual that is done to your body is something that you're ashamed of, even if it isn't your fault. It is your fault. And then, if your children are naughty, you're ashamed. If your husband is rude at a party, you're ashamed. There's just many, many things that women end up carrying around shame for. And so I wanted to sort of go to the bottom of that shame pool, which I was experiencing myself the time that I started writing this, and just go down into the dark with it. And I think that there are women who and people who experience shame their whole life, and it takes them to this sort of dark place. And so I wanted to see how deeply I was willing to explore the shame bit, the walk of shame.
Yeah, it's such an important topic. It feels like shame has been weaponized in a way that it never could have been before with social media. Right. Do you think that that aspect is something that drew you to writing the book? I mean,
yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, we live in the time of Shirley Jackson's The Lottery, mm-hmm. And the Stones are social media, and what people will say things on social media that they would not say to your face. People will say, I want to kill you. I want to burn down your house. I want to kill your children. I hope your children die. Steve Almond, who Red Hen published, I think, a book or an essay of all the things that have been said to him over the years. And like, someone was just like, hoping his child would die. And, you can't imagine someone coming up to him and saying that in person about his, I think, 3-year-old daughter at the time. But obviously someone wrote that, someone mm-hmm. typed words out. And so social media is just sort of this freeway experience of what people are willing to put down.
Yeah, it's incredible. I mean, Rattle's gotten plenty of that too. I mean, we've gotten threats to firebomb our office, and then you're like, how credible do I take this? You know what I mean? And it's a difficult time, and nobody, would ever say that. Like, nobody's ever said any of the things they've said to me to my face ever. Like, if I go anywhere, all the human, machinations turn back on, and we become civil again. But but online it just doesn't exist. There's no filter. It's like your brain is like directly wired into the tweet or something. Mm-hmm. It's just interesting time, and a great book for that. And then of course the cover is such a great image. Who did the cover? This is a perfect sort of metaphor and example for the book of hiding the hair is what Medusa's right. kind of doing in this cover here. I'll put it on the screen one more time. That's just a beautiful, perfect cover.
So the artist Nancy Farmer is kind of obsessed with Medusa and has done a lot of Medusa paintings, Medusa drying her hair, Medusa taking a bath, but this is the one that appealed to me the most. I think I felt very grateful to her for this cover, but I really love it. So I really went looking for Medusa covers that sort of humanized her in some way, mm-hmm. because I mean, you've read the book and you know that I gifted Medusa with a lot of different endings to her story. I wanted Medusa to be able to have a sort of better ending to her story than the one that she's given in Greek myths.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a wonderful way the book moves as a whole unit. It's very much a thematic book. Do you want to read another poem? What should we read next?
Let's try the poem Shame.
Okay, perfect.
It's on page 6.
Thank you.
And it starts with a couple quotes from the Bible. And he said, I heard thy voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked and I hid myself. And then from Revelations, behold, I come as a thief. Blessed is he that watcheth and keepeth his garments, lest he walk naked and they see his shame. I entered her world. I came chewing light, chewing bread, chewing anything my lips could get around. They said, stop eating, you'll be a fat girl. My lips planted around corn cobs and chicken legs. By age 10, pine sap, cat and dog food, hay, grass, dandelions, clover, wild chives, tree bark, mold, horse mash, forest mushrooms, leaves, sand, mica, fish eyes plucked from newly caught fish. I cooked a snake and ate it. I wanted to eat earth. They said, don't. You'll be a fat girl. No one will like you. Go light on waffles. In the woods, I ate everything. At the table, they watched me. Zippers exploded. Buttons flew. You must dress, they said. Only God can see you naked. I could be watery thin, have a twig body, delicate branches for arms. I could be a plucked flower, a vine. Why do you insist on being a tree? We will live in our bodies. We may not pay taxes. We may not have children. We may not make music, but we will live in our bodies, of which from the beginning to the end of the Bible, we must feel shame. When I see a thin girl, I feel shame for my splendored thighs and backside. We live with our pulse, our windowed eyes, our heads and their place in the firmament, our bodies, lumpy heaps of globular energy, a thicket of longing in which we wobble around earth. I scoop bread and eat. Take, eat. This is my body broken for you. Aren't all our bodies God? Isn't every shape divine? God declared early and late, the body, a seat of shame.
Yeah, and that was Shame, another poem from the Loneliest Girl. And what do you think it is about women that draws so much of that kind of venom? I was looking just recently, Megan showed me, I think it was Chris Pratt. Is that the guy who's the Jurassic Park actor? I mean, he just had a post that was like, happy birthday, honey, and it was his wife. And she showed me the comments just on the Instagram post. And it was like, I mean, I can't, repeat most of them, but like just awful comments about her appearance and just she's a regular happy person on a boat. I mean, what is it, do you think, that draws so much ire and animosity and just hatred about women in particular?
Yeah, it is strange. Women do seem to be an easy target. And you can see in my first poem, I'm interested in the way women target each other as well. I didn't want to put this on men. It was the other women who sowed the scarlet A on Hester, not the men of the town, the other women. I think women are very hard on other women. I think, when women are often gussying up to go out on the town, it's partly because they want to know what the other women will think of whatever they're wearing. And so we don't do as good a job as we should of reminding each other that we're all beautiful. Mm-hmm. And I think the body positivity movement that Lindy West has been working with and Roxane Gay has done something toward that. But I think the tendency in this country is just to tear each other apart. And yeah, I mean, what's wrong with Chris Pratt's wife? I know there was a lot of love for his ex-wife, but he's married to somebody else now. People move on,
Yeah. Yeah, and I wonder, I mean, is it as simple as just like the mating hierarchy? Like we're all driven for better genes and pushing our genes forward, and so we're all competing in those ways subconsciously that we don't know. And that seems like the root of a lot of it is just our unconscious drives, from biology, right? I mean, it kind of seems like that. It seems like a war of words all the time.
I think that human beings have an enormous capacity for cruelty and bullying. I have an aviary, and sorry, just a little water.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm always amazed. When one bird gets hurt, the other birds very quickly they'll kill it. They'll kill it within a couple hours, and so I think that Shirley Jackson, the lottery thing, people will think they sense weakness in somebody, and then pounce, and then everybody starts saying mean things. So that's that social media cascade. You'll see somebody says something mean, and then other people suddenly feel like they have permission, and then there's this jumping, of people all saying something about someone that they often don't know very much about. So people are saying something about you or Rattle, and maybe they don't even know what was the beginning of this kerfuffle, right? You don't know, but you've just decided to jump on and say something as well.
Yeah. I mean, there's so much to just going on with the way that social media interacts with our natural tendencies to be cruel. But I want to make sure we read a good number of poems. So let's read another poem. And I want to talk about Red Hen Press too. So don't let me forget to talk about that. But the book was so interesting that I wanted to go into that a little bit in more depth.
So let's go to page 25. This poem is called Tall Poppy. And it's based on the sort of Greek idea of tall poppy. Actually, you see a little bit of this going on in Ukraine now, but the Greek idea was that when you go into a town, you have to get rid of the leaders right away, who they referred to as the tall poppies, and then you can kind of control the town. And I kind of took this into the bullying concept. She walks around with her head in the air like she's somebody. Who is she? She came to town, built a library. Who cares? Who needs a library? We have our own books. We have our own parties. She's never invited me to one of her parties. Well, she invited me once. Once I got there, she never talked to me, never offered me a glass of wine. Her brain must be a crowded little place telling her, you're terrific. She's fallen flat on her face now. She'll be down for a while. I used to think I could help her. I wanted to say, slow down, do what I say, you'll be okay. I wanted to say, keep your head down. In this town, they'll eat you alive. But she kept laughing and marching around like she knew everything. Now that she's flat on her face, I hope she learns her lesson. I hope she learns to keep her mouth shut. She thought she was the tall poppy around here. People like her get their houses burned down. They get stung by a buzz of bees. Their heads are cut off. Goodbye, tall poppy.
Yeah, she thought she was the tall poppy around here. What a line. That was Tall Poppy from The Loneliest Girl. And one of the things that mentions it in some of the blurbs on the back, but you grew up in a cult. What is that role? I mean, you can't say that without everybody being so curious what that means and entailed. What was that like, and what does that mean? And how does that relate to the book is like the follow-up question to that.
Well, I grew up in a cult, and there's one poem in here called The Stoning Circle, and this book almost became called The Stoning Circle. It was The Stoning Circle. I think my contract calls it The Stoning Circle. Because one of the things that happened at the cult was a very right-wing religious cult, and I was there until I was 18. And one of the things that happened there was it would often be like a, quote, devotion circle, but everybody would be sitting in a circle. I was in, the quote, the girls' squad. And someone might just say, so Joni, did you see anything happen today? And she's like, I don't think so. Go around a couple of rounds until finally, because someone's supposed to come up with something. And finally someone says, well, Kathy was kind of Kathy was kind of saying some idle words. She was saying something, and then someone else is just like, yeah, I did see Kathy do something. So I was Kathy when I was at the farm.
Mm-hmm.
And then pretty soon everybody has come up with something that I did. And the thing is that on any given day, I probably did something. It's just a matter of whether they're thinking about it or whether they want to come up with it. And then there would be a beating, right?
Wow.
And I would say this is something that happened on a fairly regular basis. And so weirdly, the whole, everything about the whole current social media thing reminds me very much of experience at the farm. Because, you know, when someone throws the first stone, then everybody starts to kind of jump in. And sometimes people come up with really minor things like, yeah, she was kind of weird when she asked for salt and pepper at lunch. We're like, duly noted,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And because, I mean, like, we're talking a cult where, I mean, at 18, when I left there, I had never slept in a bed. I had never heard a swear word in my whole life. I had never seen somebody smoke a cigarette. I didn't even know what drugs were, and I didn't know what sex was. So how many crimes could I have committed,
Mm-hmm.
right? But, you know, I probably kicked somebody and grabbed something and, you know, ran around when I was supposed to be doing something else. Or, you know, they could come up with little minor crimes and it would add up to, you know. And so I do think that, like, I was just talking with a friend of mine recently. I think that someone who hadn't had all of that trauma, in other words, you know, someone who wasn't a trauma survivor already, who went through sort of a social media experience, might have experienced that differently, might have just said, wow, that's a little harsh. But for me, it was just re-experiencing my 15 years at the farm,
Mm-hmm.
and I went under. So I, hence writing this book about darkness and shame, because
Yeah.
it was a very brutal experience for me, because it felt like living my whole farm life again.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think what it does is it triggers this deep instinct that we have. You know, it feels. I think everybody kind of experiences a similar thing. It feels like a kind of drowning, like a social drowning, and you're like trying to get above water again. And I think it's because if you were excommunicated from a group, you know, through our entire hunter-gatherer history, that was a death sentence. And so, you know, there's this like reflex we have if we're about to be outcast, to be like, no, don't kick me out, like don't kill me, you know, and you're trying to claw your way back into their good graces or something. And that's the thing that's exploited. Like they found that trigger within our evolutionary biology that makes us desperate. And so people have all these desperate apologies for things that they're just taken out of context and they don't understand the right way, and it's just a misunderstanding. And I think that's something that happens all the time, and it's something that's being exploited as shame is weaponized through the social media. And so it's another reason why this is such an interesting book. I mean, because it is cult behavior too, because it's the enforcement of a sort of a collective worldview. You know, that's the purpose of like the stoning, is to make sure nobody thinks out of line. Right. And and so there's so many parallels. It's like it's a sort of a self-organizing, broad-based cult or something that's going on online.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's weird that it's all part of the left.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
it's all the left.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things too, I think we because the right-wing fascism is such a salient example in recent history that we think of that as fascism. But fascism is the bundle think. It's the group think. And, you know, and the symbol is the fasces, which is a club, a bundle of sticks turned into a club. So they'll beat you into submission. And there's an axe on top. So they'll chop your head off if you don't submit after being beaten. And it's the whole thing is a deep human impulse that we have as creatures who grew up in small tribes. And so that's what the whole social media is just exploiting for personal gain in a lot of cases, or for just a little dopamine hit of being part of the in-group too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
So about the cult, you were there till you were 18.
Mm-hmm.
How did you leave? Like, how did you realize, like, being in a cult and not having any outside experience? I mean, obviously some of the experience you had was bad, and so you knew that something was wrong maybe. But how did you know to leave, and what was it like leaving?
basically, I had been wanting to leave for quite a while, but I knew that I couldn't leave till I was 18 because, I mean, obviously at some point it had been made clear to me that I would be a runaway child and that I would just be brought back. And so I wanted to wait till I was 18 and quote an adult to leave. And then I announced that I was leaving, and they said, you know, well, okay, you can leave, but I mean, I had first said that I was going to leave, and there was this whole thing of, you know, well, you need to get out of here, and it's sort of a back and forth. But at any rate, at the point that I was leaving, they thought that I would just leave for a couple days, go sleep in the woods, which I had done before, and then I would come back. And so my mother, like I had a sleeping bag. My mother gave me $2. I had a harmonica and a dog, and I think the idea was that they thought I would leave for a couple of days, sleep in the woods, and come back. And obviously I did not. But when most people that left there, and there were other people that had left, went to family members. Mm-hmm. So I still think I'm the only person that ever left that cult, at least, who didn't really have anybody to take them in. And I did contact my father almost as soon as I left. My father is a professor at the University of Pennsylvania. He met me. He knew I was basically a homeless person. I think I was living in my car when I met him. And he just was like, yeah, nice to meet you. You know, good for you. Glad you got out, but no interest in helping me out in any way. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I had never met him before. And I think, you know, he already had another family by that time, and he just didn't have any interest in me. So I didn't end up getting to know him at that point. And I've actually only met him like maybe 5 times in my whole life. And one of them was at AWP.
Oh, wow.
AWP, Pennsylvania, in Philadelphia. He met my husband for the first time. Like,
did he come to see you there because you were there?
He lives in Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Philadelphia. So since he lives in Philadelphia, my husband and my daughter and I met him there. But again, this might have been like the 5th visit altogether since I left the farm. Mm-hmm. So not a whole lot of visits there. So yeah, I mean, I don't know what I had hoped would happen when I saw him when I first left the farm. I'm sure some part of me hoped that he would be like, oh, you know, I could help you out or something like that. But no, that wasn't going to happen. Mm-hmm. Because the whole time I'd been growing up, I'd had some idea that, like, if my father knew I was here, he would want to rescue me or something. But yeah, that failed to happen. So basically when I left, I was eventually babysitting. I had a live-in babysitting job for a little while, made money, finally got a car. But it, you know how some people say that who we are as adults is mostly influenced by genes, your genetic code. Mm-hmm. And some people would say it's mostly influenced by how you're raised, right? Mm-hmm. And since I grew up in a cult with almost no education on a farm in rural New Hampshire and walked out of there as an 18-year-old and eventually decided to get a PhD, and my mother's parents taught at Cornell and my father taught at the University of Pennsylvania, I'm going to go with I'm one for the genes.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you know, some things more than others. I've heard that how it works is mostly the genes influence everything, and then you can fuck it up with with nature, you know. But we should keep. I want to ask some follow-up questions, but we should do another poem. So what poem next?
Let's do Wound Care. It's one of my favorites. I think you know, Tim, that in 2015 it was a momentous year for our family. My husband Mark had a heart attack, and that is referenced in this. Crossed to the other side of the street to avoid the wounded. Gone to sleep to forget the wounded. Watched the wounded on television. Watched wounding on television. Read fantastical stories of wounding. Wrote fantastical stories of one's own wounding. Hidden wounds up your sleeve, down your pants, through your body, under your socks, between your toes. in the curves of arms and legs, in the radius of the abdominal cavity. Lasting wounds due to damage to underlying structures, bone, muscle, tendon, arteries, nerves. Cosmetic results not the primary consideration for wound repair. Bites cause high rate of infection, animal bites, human bites. We did not mean to wound others, but we did. We wounded our friends, we wounded our lovers. On my husband's back is a salt heart. I swim every day in the ocean, ride behind him on the motorcycle. The salt heart where my breasts press against his shirt. His heart has a new valve, one long, dark scar across his chest, a wound of slicing deeply, forcing back the rib cage, taking out the heart, replacing the valve in the heart chamber with titanium. He ticks like a clock. When I say I have been wounded, I mean darkness. Cherry blossoms open for 14 days. Petals drop, leaves begin. Be there for the first opening of white on pink. Be there when the white on pink is blinding. Be there when petals drop and green arrives. Be there into the green and falling of leaves. The bark sings to you, the leaves sing, the cherry blossoms sing of wounding, of healing, of white on pink, of blossoms. Feel petals blowing toward you. Feel morning come.
Another great one is Wound Care, again from The Loneliest Girl, Kate Gale's new book. So Kate, so after leaving the cult, how does poetry fit in? Like, when was it that you discovered poetry, and was that a part of the healing process?
Well, I actually started writing poetry right away. As soon as I left there, I started writing some extremely bad poetry. And so at first, whenever I finished a journal full of poetry, because I was just long-handing it in my journal, I would bury those journals in the woods, and that is probably for the best. Actually, I ended up at Arizona State, and through a series of misadventures, basically I had a boyfriend who had told me not to go to college, so that's why I decided to go to college. And I ended up at Arizona State, and Rita Dove was teaching there, and Norman Dubie was teaching there. And so I wrote hundreds of poems as an undergraduate, and that made a lovely bonfire by the time I graduated. So I started writing poetry right away, and I think it was kind of a means of processing everything, beginning. And then I moved to California and started working on poetry more seriously. So I would say that pretty much all my poetry until I got to graduate school was fairly bad. But I think that's the way we get to good poetry, is writing a lot of bad poetry. But for some reason, poetry became like I instantly jumped into it as soon as I left the farm. It's just that I didn't know what good poetry was, because, as you and I know, Tim, you don't know what good poetry is until you read a lot of it.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I love the expression, aphorisms are our prompt for this week. And the one that I heard recently is, there anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. And I love that one, because that's how it really works. It takes time to build up. But it's so interesting, because it feels like poets, almost all of us, have some kind of big thing we're grappling with that makes us, drew us to poetry in the first place. I had an interesting childhood too. And in my first book, which was with Red Hen Press, was about trying to come to terms with that, really. And among other things as well. But it feels like that we're all driven by that sense of trying to make sense of the senseless. And that's what sort of makes poetry happen. So just kind of moving through, after you left and you started writing poetry, how did Red Hen Press come to be?
Well, I had moved to California to go to graduate school and eventually to get a PhD. And what I wanted to do in California was to get a graduate degree, maybe a job, have fun, see if I could have a big literary life, and also get laid. And And I think getting laid might have gotten in the way of some of those other goals, because while I was getting my master's, I got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I was married. I had just gotten married. So I really got pregnant on the honeymoon. And so that slowed me down a little bit. But by the time I was 30 and I was finishing my master's, I was getting divorced. And so marriage, divorce quickly tumbled together. I guess I had finished my master's. I was getting my first teaching job, and I had a couple kids, and I decided that I really wanted LA to be a more literary city. And part of it was that my ex worked in film, so I was really aware of all the great stories being made into movies in this city,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted to be part of a different kind of story, you know. And you, in 1994, when we were getting Red Hen started, there were no writing programs. The bookstores were closing. Sisterhood Bookstore and Bread and Roses was being turned into a bridal shop, and it just felt like literary life was kind of being compressed, and yet there were all these great writers in
Mm-hmm.
LA. So
Yeah.
I thought, if we had a press here, and there were, like, Rattle wasn't going, there were no great literary magazines, you know, happening. And so I felt like if there was a great press here, then other things would start happening. And I don't give Red Hen any credit for the amazing things that have happened, like Antioch and all of that, because I think that was just bound to start happening. But that's what I wanted. I kept saying that LA was going to be the next Paris. And so I was in a writing group, and I met Mark, and he was like, oh, let's do this together. And we started dating, and eventually we did get married so we could fight about the press more easily. But when we first got started, we did not have any money. We had just both gotten divorced, and we didn't have anything. But he agreed to sell his car to get the thing going, and then his furniture. And then he drove a shitty car, and we had no furniture for the next 15 years.
Uh-huh.
But we just sat on the floor. The kids had no television, so they sat on the floor and played Dungeons and Dragons. And I think that's a good way to become a storyteller. And it was great. So that was kind of our jumping off point. So at first, he and I did all the work, and it was many years before we started having staff. And so right now, Red Hen is in Pasadena, where we've been now for 10 years. We have 10 staff altogether, including Mark and I. And we have very diverse staff. Most of the staff are people of color or LGBTs. We're very proud of how diverse the staff are. They're young, nimble, energetic millennials, and they're terrific.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, we go to foreign rights fairs. We go to London and Frankfurt, and in normal times, Beijing, Guadalajara, and we publish 25 books a year. But it took us a long time to build to that point.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of work. As you know, this whole thing is a labor of love.
Sure, and very gradual, you know, incremental growth too, as well. But having the hen house there, which is in Pasadena, it used to be a church, so there's a stage, and there's just a great area for that, and then there's office area. It's a wonderful office that you've got. Let's see. So I want to talk more about publishing, but there's some questions here that I should pass along, talking more about the writing process and the topics we were covering earlier. So Dick Westheimer asks, do you wish you had some of those old poems back to inform your new work? Do you ever wish you didn't get rid of those?
No, I don't. Rita Dove says that your old poems are like leaves at the bottom of the pond, and that's kind of what fertilizes the pond. And I like that metaphor. I think that it's good to just let them go, because I believe that your imagination is like a well that's always going to be bubbling over. There's always going to be more great ideas. And so I always feel like I can go back to the well, and there's going to be more great ideas.
Mm-hmm. And then Spartacus and Agnosterus asks, Kate, do you think each poem creates its own reality with its use of language, or that every poem refers to experiences from everyday life?
That's a good question. I I mean, I like to think that that poems straddle the imaginary world and everyday life at best. Like I like to think that poems have their feet in both worlds, because poems are at best a marriage of the intellect and the imagination.
Mm-hmm. And then, well, actually, I think we have time for like two more poems. So we'll do a poem, then a little more talking, and then the last poem. So let's do another one.
So this poem is on page 73, and it's called "Those Who Loved Medusa." So this is the backstory of Medusa. For those of you who just know the story of Medusa, where her head's cut off and her head is used to kill the Kraken. The question is, how did she end up in the island, in the cave of Sistine? And this poem kind of answers that question. She was being punished. And so this poem tells that story of how she got there. Those Who Loved Medusa. You, Poseidon, came to me in the temple. I laughed at suitors, men in love. You said I was a thing of beauty, a cup for love. You smashed the cup, you poured the wine. In Athena's temple, you raped me on the floor. My eyes met Athena's, she found me guilty. After the rape, I gathered myself in blood. Athena whispered, I curse you. Athena said, you wore red, your skirts rustled, you smiled, your hair will rustle. Your face will be unforgettable. Your silky hair will be snakes, your voice a hiss. You are creature. Carry this story forward. Rape is the fault of the victim. Carry this story forward. The female turns the key, opens the door. You raped me in the temple. I am that thing. Hold my head aloft. Laugh for generations. Don't stop laughing until Medusa is synonymous with death. Turn me into that thing you fear. Make me monster. Make me creature you fear in the dark. You fear the thing in the dark, wet, ripe, swollen, waiting for pleasure, that thing demanding. Fear the woman with her own snakes. Men kept visiting me in the cave on the island of Sistine. Men kept visiting the cave. It isn't true they all died. Imagine the men who entered the cave, found love in the dark. Imagine the men who braved the forest, found my lips. Imagine the men who found my lips.
That was Those Who Loved Medusa. Again, from The Loneliest Girl, Kate Gale's newest book. Have you always been interested in Greek mythology and other mythologies? Or it's one of the things that I have trouble connecting with. I think it's because my brain's not structured right. I can never keep track of the different names, and I just throw my hands up, and I just can never remember. And if there's a poem that someone submits that's like, you can tell a poem's well written even if you don't know what the hell they're writing about. So if it's a well written poem and it's about a Greek, I go ahead and read again, but I can't keep that in my head. So is that something you've always been interested in, or did you do a lot of reading and research for this book?
I mean, I did a lot of research, but I am interested in Greek mythology. I just feel like the twin pillars of Western civilization are Greek mythology and the Judeo-Christian ethic, and I'm kind of interested in how those two continue to influence us today, and the whole Narcissus, right? I mean, like narcissism comes from this idea of the god Narcissus looking at himself in the mirror, and I'm just interested how much of it's still, Cassandra, right? The idea of being able to tell the future, how much of it still is part of our culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think maybe if it was taught like in 6th, 7th grade or whenever we started doing mythology, if it was taught as more like these are archetypes that represent us now, and people trying to understand human nature, I think I might have been interested from the beginning. But they were taught more as like almost like history or something. It was, and just like these are stories and we should read these stories. I don't know. They're much more interesting than they're given credit for, at least in my school and in the 80s.
Right.
So for Red Hen Press, like, what is your work life like? I mean, you do so much because you teach too, and you have your own writing, and running a press is such a big effort. What is your like day-to-day like? I mean, is there any normal day? Is that even possible? And you're traveling all over for book fairs and things. What is it like to be the publisher of a great press?
So I try to set aside a day or two a week to just do editing, because obviously that's a lot of work in itself. Just going through manuscripts, doing acquisition editing and developmental editing. I always have a stack of manuscripts that I need to do developmental editing, and then I do the acquisition editing. And on the other days, besides, as you know, keeping up with email, which always feels like an endless thing. I have meetings that I'm doing, and the meetings are often with either other organizations that we're working with or with donors. We're a nonprofit. So I meet with donors or potential donors. We do have a director of development who does a lot of the heavy lifting there. So he brings me in when it's a bigger meeting. And so I do some of that. And then I do the sales conferences twice a year. I go to New York to do galley drops. I do the foreign rights fairs. When we're getting ready for sales conferences, I put together the comps for all the books. So basically each week, like each department has a bunch of things they're asking me to do. The development department will have a few things they need me to do, maybe go over a piece of a grant or get in touch with a few donors. And then publicity and marketing will say, we need comps for these books, because I have, of course, read all the books and I read a lot. So I'm going to be doing that. And then the editing department will have some editing jobs for me to do. So I'm just kind of chewing through all of this. I never get finished. Never.
Yeah. Well, I know. I mean, Rattle's smaller than Red Hen, because you do so many different things, and we're sort of a little nugget. But I can't keep up either, and it gets worse every year. Like, it never gets better.
Yeah, exactly.
But so from looking, so how many books does Red Hen publish a year? Is it still in the 20s?
Yeah, 25, about 25.
And what's the mix? It feels like you're publishing more fiction lately than you used to. Is that true?
We are. So, we started, so we were about half poetry and half prose for a long time, and we're easing toward maybe a third poetry and 2/3 prose. There's goods and bads there. Mm-hmm. Prose is a lot more work to edit. Mm-hmm. It's expensive to print. Those are the cons, I would say. But the pros are that there's more possibility in terms of the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The marketplace, as you know, for poetry is small. Mm-hmm. And so we're hoping that we can lean into being a bigger press by publishing more prose.
And so what are the, because you publish literary fiction too, which is its own like niche within, it's not like it's not like you're publishing Stephen King or something. So how much better does literary fiction sell than poetry? That's something I've never really quite understood. There are a lot more sales? Is it twice as much, 10 times as much?
Yeah, I would say that really the average poetry book that's being published by an independent press, I mean, like, that's not Jericho Brown, mm-hmm. is selling, 1,000 to 1,500 copies if you're doing well, mm-hmm. And sometimes less than that. But we're always hoping for 1,000 to 1,500 copies. Kim Dower, has a new book that's coming out, I think, this week. And I'm certainly hoping for 1,000 to 1,500 copies for I Wore This Dress Today for You, Mom. And Doug Manuel has a book coming out with us next year, and Alpha Weaver has a book coming out with us next year, and Eamon Grennan has a new book this year. All of those, I think, will be in that $1,000 to $1,500 copy range. Whereas, Carlos Allende's book, Coffee Shopping, Murder, Love, that could sell 5,000 copies. Mm-hmm. That came out in hardback. He's he's handsome, he's charming, he's dynamic, he's everywhere. I certainly think that we'll sell more like 5,000 copies. And also I think we'll sell the foreign rights to that. Mm-hmm. So that it's published in Spanish and then possibly other languages.
Yeah, and one of the things that I love talking to you is that you've been so upfront about how much, a poet has to market their own poetry. Like they have to have a presence. Like I don't think you even let poets not have a website.
Yes.
And that was like 10, 15 years ago. So how much, is it possible to be a poet if you don't want to market your poetry? Is that even a thing anymore?
I don't think so. I mean, the only poet that we have continued to publish who does not have social media and a website, either of them. I mean, like Douglas Manuel does not do social media. I think he considers it somewhat toxic for obvious, really obvious
reasons.
Because
yeah.
It is, especially Twitter. But he has a website, and he's also a pretty well-known university professor, and he does a ton of events. Percival Everett, who we continue to publish, does not do social media, and I don't think he has a website. But when people will say to me, "Oh, well, I noticed Percival Everett doesn't," I'm just like, "Are you Percival Everett? Are you really?" I mean, nothing against that. It's just like basically there is a certain stature you could have in the world where you might arguably not need that. But like I'm not as famous as Percival Everett, so I do social media and I do a website. I don't do Twitter. I'm a little afraid of Twitter, but I am working social media to the best of my little capability.
Yeah, I hear you. So when you get a book manuscript, a poetry book manuscript, what are the kind of edits that you do? Is there certain things like advice you can give people putting a manuscript together to make it like stand out from all the other? I don't know how many a year you read. We just got done reading 2,000 little chapbook manuscripts. And there is, I mean, I could list things that make it stand out for me, but what makes it stand out for you? And when you're working on it later, what edits do you do for a book?
Let's do what edits I do. First of all, so we get for the Ben Saltman contest, which is our $3,000 award. That's our big award. We get like 750 submissions for that, and I'm the first judge for that. I just do it alone, and take it down to 3, which gets sent to the final judge. Might be Akoury this year. I can't remember who the final judge is, but there's always someone like that who's the final judge. And so that, and then just poetry books that come over the transom. What I'm looking for is, I mean, seriously, first of all, let's do what I'm willing to edit. I'm very much willing to change the order. And in fact, with Awful Weaver's book, when we published it, we did a tiny bit of juggling. I wanted another poem to be the last poem, and he agreed with me on that. I also sometimes change the titles because sometimes people really haven't come up with a title. And as I said, even for my own book, I had named it The Stoning Circle, and it ended up getting changed. So titles, order. Sometimes I'll toss a couple poems out. I'll just be like, these two, they seem amazing, but they don't actually fit with this book. I don't have the time to spend more than like a couple weekends on a poetry book. And I don't know what they do like at Grey Wolf or Boa editions. I can only speak for Red Hen, but given my work schedule, I'm really going to spend a couple weekends on a poetry book, whereas I might spend 4 to 6 months on a prose book, because that's just how my schedule goes. So that means I'm really tweaking the poetry book, not overhauling it. In terms of what I'm looking for, I do think it's good to have a kick-ass poem in the beginning. I do. And I think it's good to have a kick-ass poem at the end, because I think a lot of people like look at the beginning, look at the end, and then start rocking their way through. I like it when it's really clear to me what idea the book is working to carry, and it's not just like, oh, these are well-written poems, but what the hell is this about?
Yeah.
Like this is one of my favorite books right here. I'm sure you've read it. I use this book all the time.
That's C.D. Wright. What was it?
Yeah, One Big Self. C.D. Wright, Big Self, right? And it's like there's no time when you're reading that book that you think, what was she doing here? She's trying to get you to think about the Angola prisons in Louisiana and what it's like to live there, no doubt in your mind, And so to me, it shouldn't be like, I'm just wandering through these well-written poems, but there's no kind of there, you know? And because all the books that like I really love, you know, Deaf Republic, and, you know, I could just keep going with books that I'm really in love with, you know, I get into them and I can feel the muscular structure of meaning going on in the book. And so it isn't just that it's well crafted, there's huge soul underneath.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I would say the exact same thing. It's like I used to think that it was that like if the poem was the book was about something, you could market it better, like it would work better as a book for the audience. But then I realized, judging book manuscripts, that you remember the book.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a big thing. Like just having a slot in your head and say, "Oh, this was that great book that I just read about blah blah blah." It has so much more life just having something that it's about. Whereas even if the poems are great and you're wandering through, it's like wandering through this like fog, and then the fog drifts away and it's gone. You know, I think that's a big part of it too. And our experience as editors is the same experience as readers, because we, you know, the whole world is full of reading, you know, and you want the stuff that's memorable and that they'll remember and keep with them and read again and share with a friend. And that's what matters. So that's exactly that would be my answer too.
Yeah.
And one last question from the audience here. This is CB99 Videos says, does being an editor make it easier or harder to complete your poems, Kate? Do you make a lot of revisions, or do you write these more or less in one sitting? And that's something that as an editor, I'm curious about too. So how is it your experience of that?
I think that it's harder in the sense that, first of all, you're cannibalizing the same part of your brain that would be writing. You know, you're harvesting from your own creative intellectual pool. If you were digging ditches, or like I remember many years ago, Lee told me that as long as he could, he was going to do manual labor and then write poetry, because he wouldn't be using the same part of his brain. And then finally he had to give up the manual labor. I think he was working in a book warehouse when he was in his 40s. But, you know, you're definitely harvesting that. And so many times at the end of a work day, when you've been editing or something, you don't have the heart to write poetry. And so you have to, it's hard to set aside time to write. But on the other hand, also the other part that's difficult is you're so much harder on yourself, because you've read so much mediocre poetry and bad poetry. And so when you write a poem yourself, you're like, nah, Kate, no, this is not good. And so, so I think in many ways it's difficult, but it also allows you to challenge yourself to write excellent work. And that's maybe what we all should be doing.
Yeah. How I would have asked it, I'm curious, is there a way that you free yourself from that like self-editor, like that editor part of your brain that's like, because there's a way that you can't be self-editing while you're writing and still be creative. So is there a way that you like manage to turn that off? And is it with like shitty first drafts and like knowing you're going to do that, or is it something different?
Yeah, I mean, what I do is, particularly with this book, more than anything I've ever written, is I just said to myself, I have to write this book. I'm going to, I thought of it in terms of like, I'm going down into a well, and I'm just climbing down to a well, and I'm going to write this book. And if it doesn't work for anybody else, I need to write it. And so I just kept climbing into the well every day that I worked on the book, and wrote my freaking heart out.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's kind of what made it work for me.
Yeah, well, this is people are saying this has been a riveting conversation. It has. It's been so fun talking to you, Kate. Let's finish up with one last poem from the book to close out the interview.
I'm going to finish with the last poem in the book, and it starts on page 78. And it's called Stumbling Toward Grace. Whenever I've talked about having been in the cult and everything, and the sort of massive trauma of that, people always assume that because I seem to be just walking around the world, that I've been to a lot of therapy. But somehow, because I ended up working as an independent publisher, I never really was able to afford therapy, sadly. But I've written a few poems in which I'm talking to an imaginary therapist. So If for those of you who have been in therapy and you listen to this poem, you might be saying to yourself, Kate, you've got it all wrong. That is not at all what therapy is like. But this is me talking to my imaginary therapist. Stumbling toward grace. Are you thinking of killing yourself? I'm not sure. I don't think so. Would you like to go on living? No one wants me to live. No one. Okay, my husband and children want me to live. No one else. Well, now that you mention it, I have 11 friends who want me to live. 11's a good number. So you want to stay alive for the 11 people and your husband. And how many children do you have? Technically 2. Why technically? I have 2 stepchildren who are adults. They may want me to live. But your children and husband definitely do. Absolutely, no doubt. I'd swear on it. Of course, sometimes my husband is annoyed with me, but he still wants me to live. Good to hear. He wouldn't want you to end your life. No, it would bum him out quite a bit. He'd cheer up after a few months, of course. He'd be out dating and he'd find someone easier to deal with. Most women are easier to deal with at first, but then we all turn out to be whiners. Of course. So you are going to live? Probably. Things are bad now, but they might get better. And in the meantime, 2 children, 1 husband who's only sometimes annoyed, and 11 friends. And you have a dog? Yes, a dog, a great dog, Jasper. I'd stay alive for the dog alone. That is good to hear. So what happened? Can we talk about it? We're supposed to listen and act wisely. I did neither. And then a number of people wanted me dead. I see. But they didn't actually come after you to kill you. No, they just wished me dead. What you want is what matters. I don't know what I want anymore. What did you do to annoy these people? To make them wish me dead? I wanted to be a defender. Instead, I was a heckler. What would you like to do? I have this one life, to build the cathedral of the soul, to rebuild mine like a small chapel, a single flower, a bell, a boat, a slip of paper with one perfect poem, a singular line of prose, knees on the ground, planting a row of corn, a trembling ascent of a pyramid, a bird, a grape, a perfectly poured cup of tea. I have my life to work on this single thread. There is unrestrained stupidity and there is grace. In my dreams, I stumble toward grace.
Yeah, beautiful poem. Great poem to end on. That was the last poem in the book, Stumbling Toward Grace. And the book was Loneliest Girl by Kate Gale. Thanks so much for being a guest, Kate. It was just so fun and interesting talking to you. Such important topics, too. And great insight into Red Hen Press. So all of those things are really cool. Everybody loved it. And I appreciate having you here.
Thank you so much, Tim. I hope I see you in person sometime in 2022.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sure we will. Yeah, talk to you soon, Kate. Thanks.
Okay, great.
Okay, bye. And that was Kate Gale. And once again, her book is The Loneliest Girl, which is available from what was it? The University of New Mexico Press. And you can find more, of course, at kategale.com, I believe is her website. Let me double check that. kategale.com, just like it spells, Kate, and then Gale is Gale. So find the book and more at kategale.com. And now we are going to take a really quick break and go to open lines, but we have the Poet Respond poet for tomorrow here too. So it's going to be a really quick break. So don't even go anywhere. I'm just going to make sure she's ready and say goodbye to Kate, and then we will be right back in just a second. So here, 1 second. Yeah, and we're back. Like I said, we have Julia B. Levine here. She has The Poet Visits Me in Spring, which is her poem from, it's going to be the Poets Respond poem tomorrow. And here she is, Julia B. Levine. Hey, Julia, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you, Tim?
I'm great. It's really good to see you. I think, I can't remember. I think when we published you, it was about 1.5 years ago. I don't remember if you were on the show or not, but welcome to the show either way. I think you were.
Yeah. Yeah. And I remember exactly when it was because it was in response to January 6th. So you're right. It was about 1.5 years ago. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Okay. And so, so what was the poem for tomorrow about?
So, well, it's about a lot of things, but it's primarily about the fact that I feel so helpless and terrible about what's going on in the Ukraine. And I always have this argument with myself about whether it really matters to write a poem or not. I took this incredible class on Czesław Miłosz, and he even has a line in there where he asks, what is poetry that cannot save a nation? And so I found myself in that place, and I'd been out to visit this ranch where this little lamb was rejected by the mom and basically cast away to die. So, I made up a poet who came to visit me.
Oh, so that's not a true story then. That's interesting. Well, let's hear the poem, and then and we'll talk a little bit more about it.
Okay. So you want me to just read it?
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So as you said, it's called The Poet Visits Me in Spring. After the birds bed down and the carpenter bees come out to work, we drink red wine on my porch. She says the moon is moving fast as a race car, though of course from here, we can't see it any better than we can see the faraway villagers drink from puddles, step over the dead fallen in their streets. The poet tells me a story about her terrible past, but my mind circles around that newborn lamb I saw on a ranch last week. I can't stop it. I keep seeing that little runt wobbling up, bleeding, tail wagging as she scents the ewe, only to be butted away again. And again, the heftier twin allowed the teat. And I'm thinking it was the lamb's hope that was hardest to see. How each time she rose up, she rose into the certainty that milk would fall like manna from the sheep's undercarriage, its dark and woolly sky. Now at dusk, the poet compliments my garden with its wild weeds and bolting kale. And of course, she's right. It matters. These brief explosions of seed and the ripening of the petals into perfume, even that runt cast away to die, while the living lamb walks with the ewe through fields of meadow barley and bleached sheep bones shaken out like salt. And of course, the poet's baby that died in an accident too horrible to repeat. That matters too. The way the world can break the twinned lives of a soul too early, so that only half stays here on earth, while the other is set free. Those strung between them, there will be always a line troubled by their vacancy. Perhaps that is how a door like the moon opens in the poet, where the dead walk in, ask her to pick up her pen. I love how we both believe it matters what we think in a poem. Because outside the kingdom of the page, what can we do? How else might her little boy and that lamb find each other while the moon goes on speeding to that faraway country? How else pause the war for one night so the villagers might slip from their cellars into the glittered shatter of stars? Just one night. They've forgotten how it feels to stand under all this luminous silence, to look at the fine wool that for weeks now has fallen like snow over their dead to keep them warm.
Yeah, just a beautiful poem. That was The Poet Visits Me in Spring. And so I wanted to ask just about how a poem like that comes to be, because there's so little time in the Poets Respond world to write a poem like that. And that's such a rich, like layered and kind of thoughtful poem that moves through a lot of different topics woven together. How did the poem, like, what did you start with? Like, what image did you start with, and how did the poem develop just in the writing process? I was curious about that.
Well, it's funny you're asking me, Tim. It's a little embarrassing, but I'm actually pretty terrible at writing these poets respond poems because it takes me so long.
Mm-hmm.
And so I actually had sent a couple in that you didn't take, and I'm really glad you didn't, because it took a long time to find the right technique to write this.
Mm-hmm.
I knew I had to write about that little lamb because it was just heartbreaking. And of course, the helplessness you feel watching a newborn animal be refused the one thing that would save its life is not that it's not that different than what you feel learning and hearing about a war where all these innocent people are dying or being hurt. And so those images, I just kept thinking, I don't get how they could possibly go together. And then I literally did have a friend over who talked about, if you could see the moon with a telescope, it moves really fast. You just can't tell from here. And that's what really helped me find a way to put those things together. But I also really appreciate you rejecting the other ones because they really weren't very good.
Yeah, well, I'm so glad we had this one. It's just a great poem, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with everybody tomorrow as the daily poem. Julie, thanks so much for joining us again. It's a pleasure to see you again, and thanks for sharing this poem.
You too, Tim. Thank you so much.
Yep, take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye. That was Julia Levine with the poem was "The Poets Visit Me in Spring," or "The Poet Visits Me in Spring," and there's even more to that story since in the time. I mean, the horrific treatment of the civilians in Ukraine. I've seen a couple of really bad stories the last couple of days, even since this poem was submitted on Friday night. So that's gonna be the daily poem tomorrow, and now we're gonna open up the open lines. And let me get the link for everybody. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, or in the chat window, I should say. So here is the link if you would like to join. And as always, you only need to join. Don't join unless you want to share a poem. It's all about sharing poems. If you don't want to share a poem and just want to listen to other poems, stay right where you are and just watch the show here. But if you would like to listen to poems, or if you'd like to share poems, I should say. If you have a news poem you'd like to share, if you have the prompt poem, we already mentioned the prompt is to write a poem based on or about aphorisms. If you'd like to do that, share that. Or you could just share a poem you published recently and are happy with and would like to share like a link to the website. We can show that. You can read it on stream. Whatever you'd like to do, find the Zoom link in either the Facebook or YouTube chat windows and then join me there. And I'm going to take a quick break. People are starting to trickle in. I'm going to get everything set up, and we will be right back. And we're back. Thanks for your patience. Now the open lines. I don't really have anywhere to go. It's an unusual time. A lot of times I have our softball league game right after the Rattlecast, but this time I don't. So I'm in no rush. Josephina, our daughter, has a rehearsal for her theater thing coming up that I don't have to go to. So I got all day. So let's get to a lot of poets, and let's try to find the first-time callers first. Let's go to Tanisha Carr right now.
Hi.
Hey, Tanisha, how you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. And I think this is the first time you've joined, right?
Yes. Yeah. For
So,
sure.
and where are you calling from?
San Francisco.
Very cool. I'm so glad you could join us. And I see your poem here. This is Life Beyond Lightbreak. Do you want to say anything about it before you read?
Not necessarily.
Okay. Well, go ahead whenever you want. I have it ready for everybody. And if you're first time, I should tell everybody read your own copy because I'm sharing the screen, but for YouTube and Facebook, and you can't see it. And then afterward, you can go back to YouTube or Facebook or whatever to watch the rest of the show if you want. So, okay. So go ahead whenever you're ready. I'll put this up.
Okay, sure. Life Beyond Lightbreak. I walk into the indifference of suffering, a scalding windowless room of crippling rumination. 2 doors opposite, enter and exit. You can make it through if you recall the hope of light sprinkling through tree leaves or the weightlessness of wind tickling hair wild. Surviving that room means overcoming your indifference to your own suffering, owning and living by your own self-worth, learning to deserve your own worry. And the light cracks, the roof falls, you see the exit door, but even in light break, you must leave foot after foot through the door. You must end your indifference to others' suffering.
Yeah, beautiful poem. Yeah, thanks so much for that. It was Life Beyond Lightbreak. And then you have another one too. Do you want to read the other one?
It's short.
Yeah, sure.
It's in response to just the endless amounts of war that we're seeing. It's called Invasion. When bombs singe birds to lawns now dead and buildings crumble into rubble, borderlines suddenly glow visible with shell fire, unsettling space. People escape land, communities take refuge in colonizer landscapes if they make it, fighting for dignity on imperial soil. Isn't a colonel always colonizing, even when they never leave home?
Yeah, excellent. Thanks so much for sharing those 2 beautiful poems. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you could call in and hope you can call in again soon.
For sure. Thank you.
Take care. Bye. Yeah, and that was Tanisha Carr with 2 poems there. And let's go to Carla Schwartz at CB99 Videos. She hasn't been on live in a very long time because the usual time doesn't work for her. So it'll be good to get Carla on. Hey, Carla, you there?
I am here.
Hey, Carla, it's great to see you. Oh, I love the background too.
Yeah. Oh, remember you had a couple of weeks ago, you had somebody who said do QR codes?
Uh-huh. What does that take you to?
It would take you to pre-order my new book.
Oh, that is very cool. So what's your new book? Congratulations on that.
It's called Signs of Marriage, and it's from Finishing Line Press.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you. And let's see. I sent you a prompt poem for last week that you didn't get to.
Yeah.
And I also just emailed you a poem that's in this new manuscript, so I could read that one.
Yeah, I think we have time for both. I don't think we're in any rush. We're one of those shows where we're just going to go as long as anybody is still here, I think. So feel free, and we'll just have fun with it.
Cool. So I will start with the poem that is in the manuscript, which is coming out in June from Finishing Line Press, and it's called Raspberries. And I just emailed that to you.
I have it right here.
Okay, great. As a man and a woman meet in the afternoon, safely distanced across the raspberry patch, they pick and taste, melt berry to tongue, lean in and stretch a laden branch some distance into the heart of the stand. As they pick, they move round and round the berries, a berry dance, You know how it is with raspberries. You must circle more than once to find what you've missed the first go round. They speak not the heaviness of the years lost between them, began around some other patch of fruit, not of their diaspora, not their chance reunion. No, hell no. Raspberries, only raspberries, I tell you, these two. They swallow the drupelets, ignore the scratches between fingers. They pinch the flavor.
Oh, great poem. And so, where is it that the best place people could go to find that book from Finishing Line
I
Press?
can put a link in the chat, which I guess I will do.
Yeah, perfect.
After.
Yeah, you should do that.
Yeah, and otherwise I could just, disappear
Just
for a
duck
second.
Okay.
And then, and if you do, the great thing about this, and I put it on some cards, is that to hand out if I went to a reading, is that you can give somebody a card and they put their phone camera in front of it and it goes right to buy the book, which is kind of cool.
Yeah. Did you think about that before? Was it Kim Stafford? I think Kim
Stafford. I think
Stafford.
It was Kim Stafford, yes. And, these postcards that this press gives you they give you an idea for these postcards to send out, and I'm like, mailing a postcard that has this link printed on it, it's just never going to work, right? And I do a lot of email, I'll do an email thing and put links in places. But I thought if I am going to go to a physical reading and have something to hand somebody, this is what I want to hand somebody, because then, you catch them right there.
Yeah, very cool. I'm even thinking somebody has, I can't remember who, has this little poetry machine where it prints poems on like receipts, like that kind of paper. And just even having like a little thing with a poem on it and that QR code would be so cool.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Then you could have like your own little page for that.
Yeah, that'd be perfect. I think I have to look into that. Get one of those machines.
Just know that Google Chrome, you can find a QR code for any page just using Google Chrome. If you look on the share, there's like a little share in the URL thing. One of them is share as a QR code.
Yeah, I mean, all a QR code is a different language. Like it's just a non-binary. I can't remember how it works, but it's just it's the words are in there. It's just in a way we can't read.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay, so let's do the other poem. This is a spotted salamander. I'll put that on the screen. There's a picture of a spotted salamander.
Yeah, it's from last week's prompt of a woman walking down the dirt road.
Oh, that's right. Mm-hmm.
Okay. So this is called Elusive. A woman at night walks a dirt road. Tonight, a mist suspended in air. Her flashlight illuminates the pebbles and stones. Droplets settle in front of her. Tonight, a mist suspended in air, but it hasn't rained enough to force droplets to settle in front of her. Then what else creeps and bubbles the dark? It hasn't rained enough to force the spotted salamanders from underground to creep and bubble in the dark, though frogs break quiet with belching sounds. The spotted salamanders still underground as the woman stops beside a vernal pond. The frogs break quiet with belching sounds, and the woman this night along a dirt road.
Oh, that's great.
At the woman, sorry.
I love that. I love all the slant rhymes. Thanks for sharing that, Carla. That's great.
Thank you. Yeah, so I put that into a pantoum.
Yeah, very cool. Thank you. And have a great night. Good to see you. And I think what we're gonna do, because most people wanted the morning show, I think we're gonna just have morning show still, but flex more out to different times just for fun. So every once in a while, at least maybe once a month, we'll try to have a different time. Maybe that's what I'm gonna do. So hopefully we'll see you.
I hope to too. Bye-bye.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye. There was Carla Schwartz, also known as CB99 Videos, with two poems, Elusive and the Raspberry one. I can't remember the exact title, but check out, and Carla's going to leave a link for her books in the chat windows. So let's go next to another poet that doesn't get on very much at the morning time, Angela Gartner.
Hi.
Hey, nice. Angela. How you doing today?
Good.
There you are. Yeah, hello. Good to see you. Yeah, so how you doing?
Good to see you. Good. Real good.
So what do you have that you would like to share?
Well, if it's okay if I share the two, these are I went ahead and emailed it to you.
Yeah, I have the viewfinder and the nail job, right?
Yeah, these are two Poets Respond poems. Both are from the hold on, I'm sorry. Both are actually okay. Here we go. I have to open it myself. All right. Both are about the Russian-Ukraine war.
Mm-hmm.
The first one is really kind of my perspective as kind of a journalist, and talking about people who are photojournalists, who are we're just seeing some horrific scenes from this, and it's because of the work of photojournalists, and it's so important. So the viewfinder is really
and so dangerous
that
too.
perspective.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine what they're going through, but I'm so thankful that we, I mean, there terrible things are happening, but we need to see this, and their work is very important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the same. It reminds me of the firefighting journalists or the fire journalists, because we don't know anything about like our town's evacuated and they're driving around taking pictures and like your house is still here, like this is where the fire is and things like that, and they're risking their lives doing it because people have died. Yeah, it's the same kind of thing. It's a really important job. So let's hear this. The viewfinder.
The viewfinder. In the little window, the young boy stood next to his mother, shaking from the cold and the loud sirens where planes dropped bombs. In the little window, a soldier with his gun rides in an armored car past the town's mass grave where the rat bodies are waiting to be recognized. In the little window, you are in a damaged building where the walls have cracks, blankets and teddy bears are next to 4 infants swaddled on the ground. In the little window, you find in the crowd a family running with full bags, carrying their kids, a dog at their side, a stroller is left behind. In the little window, your eyelash reflects in the glass, just a flicker of you in the mirror of the camera lens before you get back to the action.
Yeah, it's Angela Gardner with the viewfinder. I love the repetition there. It works really well. And then the nail job. Do you want to explain that too?
Yeah. I just, again, looking at, the photos, there was one week where you just saw so many hands in the dirt of people who were, had been killed, and, you see their nails. And lately, I mean, I've been into painting my nails lately of different colors and, having fun, but, it's just, to see those hands. And there was one story where a manicurist actually recognized someone who she works with, who, they were working on a kind of a fashion thing. And she recognized her hands as someone who was killed. Like she recognized her nail job. So it's like just the little things, the little details in these horrific photos that we're seeing. And I couldn't help get that out of my mind. This woman, polished nails, so excited for the future. And, she was one of the people who was laying on the ground, coming home from work and killed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Such a heartbreaking story. Go ahead whenever you're ready with the nail job.
The nail job. I see hands bent to a claw where the blood river flow drains underneath decay. It's her fingers in the mud, red acrylics made into a fist, filed in shape amidst stones. The curly hairs on his back, long nails, stained cuticles, stiff against tied white cloth. Light purple plates don't breathe on an almost buried woman in a dirt pile for the morning. I look to mine, slappily polished. My digits are clicking on keys for the hands of the lifeless.
Yeah, great poem. Thanks for sharing both of those, Angela, and always a pleasure to see you.
Always a pleasure. Have a great day.
Yep,
Thank
too.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
It's Angela Gardner with the nail job and the viewfinder. And let's go next to Andrew Tradinick with Andrew at a reasonable hour, perhaps. What time is it there now, Andrew?
It's actually it's 9 a.m. like it's just daytime, and it's my school vacation, so I'm not actually at work.
Yeah, well, that's perfect. It's a much better time for sure than like 4 a.m. or whenever.
Yeah, it kind of is, and none of your all your suggested times for the alternatives, none of them really work for me because work and stuff. Yeah, so whatever. It's great. I feel very privileged to just be able to connect to you guys at all. So it's great.
Yeah, well, we're glad to have you, and glad to have you at a reasonable time for once. So I think you have 2 poems here, a short one and a long one.
Yeah. I put they're both pretty short, but a good man who can find is the prompt poem basically. It's just got a little footnote explaining what all the aphorisms sort of were.
Interesting. Do you want to explain now, or do you want to just read it and let us?
Yeah. So basically, I was just intrigued by a story that I saw somewhere. Someone was reposting online that a mega church in the US had opened up its car park for overnight parking for homeless people. And then I realized when you Google it, there's a lot of places doing that. They're going, like homeless people living in cars.
Is that something that you have in Australia going on right now, or is that
a little bit not as, I don't think as seriously as in the US, but certainly it's happening because house prices are insane here. It's utterly insane.
Yeah, for us, it's we're like in the middle of nowhere, kind of relative to Southern California, and for the first time, there are homeless people in the parking lots, which is, in the middle of the high desert where it's going to be like 110 degrees. It's kind of frightening. I don't know what. Hopefully, I don't know what we're going to do as it gets warmer out.
And it's increasingly happening with we've had lots of floods in our and so people are displaced and these things are very real, even if they're not obvious to us in suburbia sort of straight away. Anyway, so I just saw that story and then it just somehow came together with a couple of the aphorisms of life short, art long, crisis fleeting, experience perilous, decision difficult from Hippocrates, which apparently is like one of the first aphorisms.
Oh, really?
According to Professor Google, and Bruce Cockburn album, Life Short, Call Now. So I just brought those all together, and with the turning around a biblical reference, the good woman who can find from Proverbs, I turned it around a bit. So I'll just read it. It's quite short, and it actually turned out to be like a high bun, actually, just accidentally, like a mini high bun, sort of, kind of. So a good man who can find. A mega church is repurposed as a field hospital when the pastor invites homeless people to park securely overnight and then cooks breakfast. Life short, call now, art long, crisis fleeting, experience perilous, decision difficult.
Yeah, very, very, very Tonka-ish or something. Yeah, thanks for sharing that one. And then the other one, what was the other one?
Oh, it's just a tiny little high Sciku. I think it's a Sciku.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm new to this stuff. I read a story about moths. Apparently, butterflies do the daytime pollination. Moths do the nighttime.
Oh, interesting.
And that's why lots of flowers put out heavy perfume at night.
Oh, because that would make sense. Interesting. I had no idea. You learn something every day.
I read that somewhere or heard about it somewhere. And then when I Googled it later to find an actual story, the moths take the night shift. I'd written the moths take the night shift, but it was already in the journalist's headline. So anyway, it's just very... Moths take the night shift. The perfumed flowers. Who knew?
Yeah, I don't know how I've lasted that long without knowing that.
Who knew?
Yeah,
exactly. Who knew? So, thanks, Tim, and thanks for the great poetry and the guest today too. It was great to hear from Kate. Really.
Yeah, it really was. Yeah, very interesting conversation with her.
Powerful tale of a life, amazing life.
Yeah, it really is. Like she should have a movie written about her. I think I'd watch it. Anyway, thanks again, Andrew. Take care.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go to Mike Bales next.
Hello, new time.
Yeah, hey Mike, just temporary though. just because of the holiday. And then I think we're not going to do a Mother's Day, so the 8th. Oops, hang on a second. Let me mute Andrew. There we go. Okay, yeah. So go ahead, Mike. Sorry about that.
So
I was saying just to finish the sentence is that I think Mother's Day we're going to be doing a show not on Mother's Day in the same way. So maybe once a month or so we'll do a different time.
Yeah, I'm going to eventually have to get work, and I hope it doesn't interfere with too much. I'm a laid off guy from a community college bookstore.
Oh,
and
yeah.
Unemployment's now saying you got to look, and I think I've got to figure out how to get by. When I love the job, when you work like a month and you're laid off like 3 months, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Is that
but
the flagger
it's nice
job?
when I do it.
Is that the flagger
Pardon?
job or the bookstore you mean?
Well, the flagger thing I've been done with about 3 years ago.
Oh, have you? Okay.
The flagger job's the best thing that ever happened to my writing. All those things I've seen,
Mm-hmm.
but the bookstore is great. You know, I'm a book person. This is great. I think the featured guests and just the co-readers with me, I think, push me to be about the best I can be. You know, and I hope to get better and better than my current best.
Well, it's fun watching it. Yeah. So is this a Poet Respond you're going to read?
It is.
Okay.
I was combining two things. The ongoing war, which I don't think any of us can get it out of our minds.
Mm-hmm.
And Pink Floyd reuniting for one song. A friend told me about it, and I Googled. You can't hear the whole song. There's a guy singing in a town square in Ukraine, and he actually worked with Pink Floyd about 40 years ago on one of their albums.
Oh, wow.
And they heard it. I haven't heard the whole thing. I think you have to purchase it as a fundraiser for Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
But they heard it, and the remaining members of Pink Floyd and the people who've worked with them for the last 40 years laid instruments over it. So, and the song is called Hey, Hey, Resistance.
Interesting.
And this poem's called, and I've been telling everyone last week, driving crazy, saying Pink Floyd reunited.
That's a great idea for a fundraiser, I got to say. That's really good.
So this is called Refrains of Resistance. A villager in the square dances. His song rises into the air, and in a studio, riffs are overdubbed. A guitar cries out to the heartfelt rhythm of bass and drums. A rock group reunites after a 20-year absence. The song rises. The chorus cannot be stilled after all the years. The group cannot stay silent to the world around them. And the sound rises above their differences, above the thunder of cannons and guns, above the cadence of 10,000 troops, above the evil of a rogue nation, above, and measures of freedom rise above the rubble. Speaking for villagers, the lyrics proclaim what's ours is ours. One man sings, he bleeds for measures to the beat of peace and justice. The message resonates, unity proclaimed, humanity of all humanity, villagers at heart, in a world grown small.
Yeah, great poem. I love the rhythm of that. Really a lot of energy. Thanks for sharing that, Mike.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, take care. It was Mike Bales with Refrains of Resistance. And I'm going to let in, there's a couple more people in the waiting room too. So we should have a couple more people coming in. And let's go to Carolyn Codd next.
Hello.
Hey, Carolyn, how you doing?
Okay, how are you?
I'm doing great. It's good to see you. So what do you have that you'd like to share?
I have a religious poem.
Perfect.
It's in response to Holy Week and Easter season. I wrote it as a part of a project at our church where some of us got together and did different projects to do with Holy Week.
Mm-hmm.
And this one turned out to be, a friend and I worked on it together. I wrote the poem and she did some illustration, and we did it kind of like a collage where the poem was divided up into different sections with illustrations and some decoration and that sort of thing.
Yeah, very cool. Great use for poetry for sure.
Oh, okay. So, and also this is contrasting. I lived in Spain for quite a while, and it's contrasting the way I saw Holy Week in Spain and the way I see it here. So Holy Week. Spain, Semana Santa. Processions portraying Christ's way to the cross. Images imitating his suffering and death. Singers salute their Lord from balconies, wailing with worship their mournful songs. Finally, Friday, the good one, arrives. Silence sets in after sundown. Then processions proclaim the death of Christ. Deafening drumming vibrates in hearts. Great gloom sets in. He is sealed in the tomb. Suddenly, Sunday of Easter dawns, ending Semana Santa in Spain. Outside on the streets, few signs of happy hallelujahs are heard or seen. Here, however, we follow the rest of the story. Women went early and finding the tomb empty, wondered, where have they taken him? Angels appeared and announced, he is not here. He has risen, as he said. Mary Magdalene is greeted by Jesus and announces all this to the others and to us. Joyful, joyful, we all adore thee. We welcome you with open hearts. We will announce your presence even today.
That was excellent. Great timely poem. Thanks so much for sharing that, Karen. That was Holy Week by Carolyn Codd. Thanks.
I have a question.
Oh yeah, sure.
I don't know if it's obvious or not, but all the lines, at least the first two words, begin with the same letter. And I guess a couple of them begin, it has 3 or 4 words that begin with the same letter. And I guess I started doing that because I said to myself, Semana Santa and the S. And then I just kind of thought I'd follow that through all the way through. And I don't know if that added anything to it or detracted.
I think so. You know, the
sound of it.
There's like the heavy consonants going on, and actually in the Old English, like the Old English epics, like Beowulf and stuff, they had, instead of having rhyme, that's what they did. So it was a line of poems. Once it had the 3 same sounds repeat at the front of the instead of the end of the word, which is really interesting because it's still, you know, it's Old English, but it's still English, and we did exactly the opposite. So this is kind of like that. It's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of interesting to do.
Yeah, it was. Thanks for sharing that, Carolyn.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, take care.
You too.
Okay, let's go to Guy Chambers.
Hi, Tim.
Hey, Guy, how you doing?
Not too bad. How you doing?
I'm doing good. It's a fun day for poetry. A fun day Monday.
Yeah, that's what you should call it. Yeah. I would say I could compliment Westheimer there, the poem he had to start the show. I thought that was really good. I can say is wow.
Yeah.
It took me, even the title just took it right away. So it was well done.
Very good stuff. Yeah.
So I written some for the prompt here. I decided to write some one-liners, and I wrote a whole bunch. These are the ones I came up with there. So, because I'm so busy with a couple of writing groups up here. Of course, it's a poetry month, so I'm writing up. They got 30 poems in 30 days. So
wow.
Write a poem
Yeah,
every day.
I've never done that, but I always want to. Maybe when the kids are grown.
Yeah, I did that. I did that last year with one of the group. Then I was with another group, so I got almost doing 2 a day. So it's fun anyhow. Mm-hmm. But here's what I came up with, some of the prompt ones here.
Okay.
Good insight keeps everything right. Lies will keep everything awry. Laughter is organic medicine. Our heart goes a long way. Dreams are abundant, just need to be grasped. Time is a key to open doors. Words just said, eyes can't hide what was indeed said.
Oh, that was really good. I mean, if you told me that any of those were famous, from Plato or something, I would completely believe them. Those are great.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing those, Guy.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah, take care. It was Guy Chambers with some aphorisms. I think I like laughter is organic medicine, but a heart goes a long way is great too. Let's go to David Tenson. I think he's a first-time caller.
I am. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. Hey, David, how you doing?
Good.
Very nice
from
setup
Australia,
you have there,
if you
by
could-
the way. Oh, no,
Thank
Australia.
you.
Yeah, that's great. You have
Yep.
a great mic and a great lighting. Much better than me.
Yeah, I do quite a bit of teaching and stuff. So this is my little jam here.
Very
Thank
good.
you.
Well, it looks professional. So what do you have that you'd like to share? Let me try to find. Did you email something in?
I did not.
I forgot to say that. Yeah. So if you want,
I didn't
show
know
the
that. I'm
poem-
sorry. I would have done that. I'm so sorry.
No, it's no problem. I just forgot to say it. Just email it to openmic@rattle.com, and I'll swing back to you so people can see the poem as you read it. Is that okay?
Yeah. I can always just send you the link to the.
Yeah,
To
perfect.
it
Yeah.
now,
So
if
why
you
don't you do
wanna
that? I'll
show
do
that.
someone else, and I'll come back to you.
All right. Here
Okay.
we go.
So let's instead go to David Cook, who hasn't been on in a while. Hey, David, how you doing?
Hi, how you doing? I'm doing great.
Yeah, good to see you. So what do you have that you'd like to share?
I sent it once and then I sent it again. It's the Good for the Perfect poem.
Yeah, I have it right here, and I have the newest one, so don't worry about that.
Oh, good. Yeah, this poem I was one of the first poems I wrote after I was divorced, and it's basically just a poem about losing your spouse to the validation of work, and so I just tried to kind of animate work in this creature, this kind of celestial being of angel, and to have it kind of be a little bit biblical, but it basically came out of there's this myth when you're born, where if you still remember your pre-existence, and until the devil comes in and puts his finger on your lip and shushes you, and then you forget everything before you're born. Yeah, I thought that was kind of a neat.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. That's a really cool story.
Cool. So I'll start here. I don't have my reading glasses, so bear with me.
Okay.
Good for the perfect. Good for her to have a friend. She loved to dance, let her dance. Who was I to pass against this angel at work, befriending her, flying with her? At home, I'd hold her hand and rub the loose rib under her shoulder. I shook this angel's hand. Its loose grip kept my thumb on its knuckles. My finger touched the gravel I felt embedded in its palm. Its hand on her waist moved her forward. Its hummingbird eyes looked back, saying, "Trust me as far as you trust." Her spine, like knuckles of a fist, her ribs clenched over her heart. She danced in heels she'd hesitate to wear with me. It circled, dragging its finger along her. Just the tips of its fingers spun her round the funnel of its chest. I was assured of their platony when it held her hand, saying, "I'm like a girlfriend," with the breathy drawl of a Confederate mother. Wings twitching with the cadence of its voice, I could see they were talking, saying, "Under your wing, if not for you." I thanked it for that. I thanked God for it. Legs long like contrails, blood on its knees, perfect in its movement, timing the drop of its hand, a percuss on her back, unclasping her chest as she spun, bringing her in, pressing its thumbs to her temples, opening her eyes like luggage, lifting her like expectations, revealing all her marital truths, then placing its finger on the pleat of her lip. She forgot about me.
Thanks for sharing that, David. I can hear the emotion in it. I appreciate it. That was a good
Thank
for
you.
the perfect David Cook. Thanks so much, David.
Have a good day.
Yeah, you too. Okay, let's swing back. Let me see if we got the email yet.
I put it in the chat.
In the chat.
Here.
Okay.
Sorry, I didn't have the email.
Oh, no problem. Yeah, let me chat the Facebook.
You got to in the chat for this Zoom.
Oh, for the Zoom chat. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. There's just a lot of stuff. Let's see.
There is.
No, perfect. This is perfect though. It was my fault because I'm supposed to say to email the poem to openmic@rattle.com, and that's one of my one of my duties, and I've failed in my duties. But so this is the Wrestle.
Yeah. So this is from a book I published a couple of years ago. Did well. It's called The Wrestle.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah. And what is this this art that goes with it?
The art on the blog image is it's really a wrestle of Jacob with God. So I wrote this on the other side of coming out of a whole stack of burnout and religious deconstruction and a whole lot of things. It's largely the theme of the book of the same name, and so this sort of leans into that story of what it's like to wrestle with God, because some people are afraid of it, don't want to ask questions, but for me, I at the end figured you can't get any closer than if you wrestle. Yeah,
for sure. Yeah. Well, why don't you go ahead and read it?
Yeah, thank you. I found you beyond the why, far from the why not, worlds from the why me. You held a space for me, beyond answers to questions my pain had, as if you knew information was never going to heal or resolve or fix my suffering. Instead, you agreed to wrestle through many nights, never letting go, always with me just like you promised. Refusing to surrender, I eventually realized that wrestling with God was not a crime, that I was, in fact, being held, being healed, being transformed by finding you beyond answers, being blessed by holding on to you in my doubt and frustration, and never letting go. And you never let go, and you overcame me in the end, and we both won.
Interesting. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. The Wrestle, that's from the book The Wrestle, and they can find that at davidtenson.com. That's David Tensen.
Or Amazon anywhere.
So I don't know, wrestling with God. What was it, if you could, like, in a nutshell? I mean, I don't know. What did you find? I mean, what was your sort of
I found
conclusion?
Yeah, I think what I found was often in the first half of life, if you grow up in a religious environment, for me it was Christian in my teens, you're told to follow the rules. You're told that things would work a particular way. You're told to not really question God, just believe. And so, I mean, there are other poems in the book, but it kind of unpacks this whole idea of, no, you should doubt, and you should ask questions, and you should wrestle, and don't distance God from your struggle. Actually understand that God's in that all the time. So for me, I discovered God in a Trinitarian sense was far more committed to me than I am to the Godhead, and kinder and more inclusive. And this was a joy actually to wrestle in the Judeo system. You do wrestle with God. That's why this story appears again and again in scriptures. But quite often in evangelical, those kind of circles, it's not. You just turn up, you believe, you do the right things, and God should do the right thing by you. But you can go through bankruptcy, a whole lot of stuff, and you figure out the kind of way that I think God should be kind of has to die. And for me, this is another Easter theme poem about God disappears and he disappoints, and then God turns up in a different kind of way. And that's can't be prescribed. That's what I've discovered. It can't be prescribed.
Well, it's always interesting there. I don't know if it was Chris Anderson I was talking about this with, who we might have on one of those Monday shows I mentioned, because he's a Catholic deacon, and so we couldn't do Sunday morning, I'm sure. But about this thing, I can't remember the phrase, but there's a phrase of it when you go to seminary school and then your mind like explodes, and like so many people drop out because they go from believing it as doctrine to questioning everything, and it's such a radical transformation when you actually go to seminary school. I can't remember the phrase for that, but there's something that happens, and very common, I guess, for people to drop out.
Yeah, and there's a kind of a trend that's happening through a lot of the evangelical or mainstream churches of deconstruction. So people that have been in it for quite some time, all of a sudden, I mean, it's something I think happens in a natural sort of maturation in any spiritual discipline, as you begin to go, okay, that hasn't worked out like I thought. And you start gaining and giving yourself courage and permission to ask questions. And sometimes it happens at seminary, and sometimes it happens at the cemetery.
Yeah, that's great. Well, speaking of aphorisms, that was great. Well, thanks for joining us, David.
Thanks for your time.
Great to meet you. Hope you can call in again sometime soon. I think the regular show time is impossible in Australia, but unless you're a crazy morning person. But otherwise, maybe we'll catch you on another alternative time day.
All right. Thanks, Tim.
Yep,
Bye-bye.
take care. Bye. Yeah, there was David Tenson, of course, davidtenson.com, TENSEN.com to find more of his work. Let's go to Kimberly, and then we can finish up with Richard Westheimer and sort of end how we began. But let's go to Kimberly. That's Kimberly McNeil, I should say. Hey, Kimberly, how you doing? Oop, you got to unmute. Let's see. There you go. Hey, Kimberly, how you doing?
Hi, it's nice to meet you.
Yeah, great to meet you. So glad you could call in. So you have two poems you'd like to share, Salutatorian and Shame, right?
Yeah.
And which one would you like to do first?
How about Shame?
Okay, perfect.
Just a second.
Yeah, no problem. I have it up on screen for everyone at home.
Okay. I'm really nervous.
Oh, no problem. Don't worry about it.
Burku hooded, full-length A-line blackness swings below a tunic to confine her. Oversized black fabric hides the entire shameful woman. Her sweaty, pale, meatball-sized, milky tits and muscled thighs are nightly pinched and squeezed and sucked in private. Hooded, futile ocular slits flash wet, defeated, made-up eyes. The sweaty mouth hole orifice smells of putrid, hateful gases. Body odors that emanate from the decaying carcass that was her soul.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. That was the entire shameful woman, a fitting poem for the topic earlier in the episode. And then
yeah, that's what made me think of it.
Yeah, and then the other one is Salutatorian. So do you want to explain what that's about at all? Is that a take? Is that what is that?
A salutatorian is the person who graduates second.
Oh, that's right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
The valedictorian is first. And this poem, well, interestingly enough, I talked to 5 salutatorians.
Mm-hmm.
And with each person, if I just let them talk and listened, they all felt that they were cheated.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
In the end of the interview I had, they all felt that they should have been valedictorian.
You know, the funny thing is, I graduated 3rd in my high school class, and I felt cheated. And it was because the first 2 people were in music programs, and they got to count those as credits. And I was in sports, which did not count as credits. And I thought music and sports, that should count too. So they
Yeah,
ended up with
that's
more.
exactly
Yeah.
the stuff that they were saying.
Well, I guess it comes around. But here, let's hear it. This is Salutatorian.
Oh, shoot. I just had it here. Just a second.
Oh, no problem.
Okay. Oh, salutatorian, graduating, dieting, best dressed, unconfident, in 6-inch heels. Handshake, diploma, quarter turn smiling. She imagined a runway, strutting and styling. But starving and purging left her dizzy and vagal, completely unable to break her own fall. 15 feet from the stage to the floor. She was covered with blood. Her skirt was askew. The crowd stood to see what the boys said they knew. A few of them clapped. Others quickly obtained a flash photograph of this girl exposing herself. Her pelvis was shattered. A leg was bent backwards, a pose that the crowd did not like. She's semi-consciously smiling, as taught all her life, at men laughing and pointing with tragic delight. Ogling her exposed panties and thighs, they called her a tart and a whore in disguise. Parents demanded her scholarship prize and salutatorian title be taken away. Indecent performance, punishment lies, became her legacy, ruining her reputation forever.
Yeah, thanks so much for sharing that. Another poem very fitting for the topic earlier. Thanks, Kimberly, for sharing both those poems.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yep, take care.
Okay.
It was Kimberly McNeil with a salutatorian. I don't know if I'm ever going to say that word right. Let's go to now Dick Westheimer, finally, the very patient Dick, who's been here for 2 hours and 40 minutes. Hey, Dick, how you doing?
I'm doing great. I was just enjoying poems. There's so many good ones today.
Yeah, it's a fun episode. I like it.
Yeah. I sent you a note in chat. I think Sharon Ferrante has sent in a poem by email. I'm
going to try to see who I can catch with.
Okay.
With some more poems before we go. And we haven't done Carlton Johnson and Ted Guevara have poems. Potter has a haiku, so I'm going to try to catch a couple of them. I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to get everyone, but I'm going to try.
Can I take a moment to finish up a couple comments about the... So first of all, it started as an aphorism poem, the original about don't fly too close to the sun.
Oh,
and I had that sitting on my desktop, and then I read the Fern story. And I hope I didn't upset you too much with Ariadne's string as the.
I looked it up. I always do, and I read about it, and now I don't remember anything.
You don't.
I don't know. For some reason, the mythology stuff just will not stick in my head, no matter how many times I read about it.
I'm the same way. I have the top level ones, but when I read down into it, I found that was a more compelling metaphor than the other. The other thing I wanted to share about that one is that the poem became about my relationship with my daughter and understanding her world in a better way.
Yeah.
It's not, it didn't, and that was sort of the magic of it, is that's the thing that happened at 12:30 at night on my time, Saturday morning, as the poem was just sort of not working, and then that's what emerged from it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was the key to it, really, that it became that personal level and another layer to it all, too, on top of the story itself.
Yeah. And the other thing is the metaphor that caught the most responses from people was the dandelion. Mm-hmm. And which was another sort of serendipitous one in that I was I was thinking about the dandelions, and I looked that they came to be 30 million years ago.
Oh, wow.
And so it's like, and I was thinking that the non-binary queerness has been in the world as long as there have been people. Mm-hmm. Before people made time, and that just fit up with with the dandelion piece. So it all fell together very late at night. I'm glad you have the late dandelion.
Well, that's great. It worked fine. Well, I don't really read them until the Saturday morning for me, anyway. So
yeah. Good stuff. Well, I did send in another Poets Respond poem as I've been doing. One of the things, and sorry to lard up your inboxes, I'm just not going to let Ukraine poems take the route that social media has taken, which is the war is over.
Yeah.
Just because more people are dying, more people are suffering, the thing is worse and worse. It has sort of dropped from the attention of the Twitter sphere in large part.
Yeah, well, not poets. I mean, we're still getting a lot of poets about it, and even tomorrow's poem is about it too. I'm trying to find poems that are like doing it in oblique ways and stuff, because I think we've had like a dozen poems on it. But poets are definitely still engaged with that story. But it's true, I don't see much about it on social media, at all anymore.
So this one was called The Search for War and Peace. Mm-hmm. And I just, I heard the Pope's Palm Sunday sort of call for peace and started, I don't know Palm Sunday. To me, it falls in the world of mythology. I read about it every year and then I forget it because it's not my, cultural currency. And one of the things I found out was that Palm Sunday for Eastern Ukrainian and Russian Christians is the next week. It's not even the same week. So there's like this sort of disconnect, and that's what prompted this poem to unfold. So, The Search for War and Peace. It's Palm Sunday, and the Pope of Rome calls for peace. The April air smells like potentiality, like new-mown grass, like just dug soil, like fresh gunpowder. Our kitty stalks prey in the front yard, catches a rabbit. Yesterday it was a snake. And I think this is a metaphor because in Bible stories, snakes are more sinister than bunnies. The same Bible said Jesus rode into Jerusalem on a donkey, triumphant. But I suspect the creature was confounded by the tangle of palm fronds and ragged coats laid at his feet. He did not care that the rabble acclaimed his rider a king, just that the stench and shouts of the crowd were too much, that he craved the craziness to cease, yearned to graze, to be relieved of his burden, which may be a metaphor too, because his burden was the Prince of Peace. The Pope did not pray for the donkey, neither did he pray for the bunny or cat, though peace between cat and rabbit would be a good thing. Don't raid our garden for carrots and peas, dear Leopardite. You, the queen of breeding, and you, cat, stop being a cat. Just stop. This is the message of the Pope of Rome, who does not mention that declawed cats are more likely to bite, that the venom of snakes can raise the dead, that rabbit meat was prized by monks during Lent, that the word for peace in Ukrainian is mir, that the word for peace in Russian is mir, that Google searches for war are 5 times that of searches for peace.
Yeah, very interesting. Thanks for sharing that, Dick. Always a pleasure. Great poems all around, as always. And it's cool to have you at the beginning and the end of the show, too.
Thanks, Tim. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
It was Richard Westheimer with The Search for War and Peace. Now I'm going to shut off my Zoom stream, and we're going to read a couple poems, and I have my prompt poem as well in the Sciku, so stick around if you're still sticking. And I'm not going to be able to read everybody's poems, but I do want to get to a couple of these. So here is Sharon Ferrante's poem, A Dirty Spell. Let's read this and let's drop down. This is Sharon Ferrante with A Dirty Spell. A woman walks down a dirt road late at night. She steps heavy on its lightness. It flies. She lingers, wondering how it could be so open, yet cover her, closed. She decides she wants to live like this dirt. So come the next late night, she brings another woman, heavy closed, lingering, unable to fly. Very fascinating poem. That was for last week's prompt. A woman walks alone down a dirt road late at night, I think was the prompt, and that's A Dirty Spell by Sharon Ferrante. Thanks for sharing that, Sharon. Let's go to this haiku really quickly. This is Peter O'Donohue, and this is here we go, short haiku. Let me put this up here. I watched a kettle. You might not believe it, but it really did boil. And he says, P.S. George is right. So that is Potter's haiku. I watched a kettle. You might not believe it, but it really did boil. That's great. Thanks for sharing that. And let's keep moving on. And Ted Guevara has an aphorism poem here with a beautiful picture, too. These are, this looks familiar to me. These are the Joshua trees that we have down by us. I'm not sure where, but Joshua trees, they talk about them being endangered, but they're like a million that we drive by every day. And so let's see what Ted Guevara was writing about this. This is Umbrella. Some days we open it, we the people, the very beating heart of the dry, round space we feel in. We stand on, sounds too civic, too stale. In the plentiful day, rain is rejoiced. Others see it as danger. Drops turn tsunami. A farmer just pegs rain at a different angle. To him, the get or the have is participation in humankind. We, in general, just feel wet. Oh, that's great. We, in general, just feel wet. There are a couple great lines in that. Thanks for sharing that, Ted. And, I should have mentioned the reader's note first. He says, reggae artist Bob Marley coined "Some people feel the rain, others just get wet." It would be great if you would read both this week and last week's prompts. So let me read last week's as well. This is the Dirt Road poem. Oh, and he has the same picture here of the Joshua trees, because it's another dirt road. And this is Dr. No. So let's read Dr. No. Dr. No. On my list, she checks out fine. It's not a reality check. We were pasted together among our group. Last of this evening, we were together still. Don't tell me she had a different take. I must see her face, the rhythm of her beats. I ain't no cardiologist, but I can switch on the viewer and read. She's out there now among the cacti. We can decipher a road, but it's all a road out here, with the dirt and the unforgiving night. She said she had to go. She said she couldn't breathe another ounce of air I'm breathing. In my state of mind, this is fine, unreality fine. If I were an MD, I would be revoked tonight, I know. She still bores through all the thick fog I've harnessed, and she's out there alone, walking by ridiculous creatures and huge Joshua trees that were pretty this afternoon. I hope she's alone. Our story is of pull, having a duplicate of me. That's a lot on the plate. I can take care for the both of us, she argues, and him too. I imagine a precious being in my undeserving arms, having that term. Among this sitting crowd, my desolation is with her. What do you think complete means? She had asked. I don't want to argue, even in projection. Plenty of veg. The desert is young out there. It holds no age to the point of being barren. Hey, great last line, Ted. Another good poem that's Dr. No by Ted Guevara. And he says, Joshua trees have a lifespan of 500 years. They're protected, but some parts are edible, maybe for survival purposes. They're also a nesting home to birds and insects. Yeah, if you're in, they carry water, so you can, like a cactus, you can find yourself. The other interesting thing is that they used to be carried all over the West. They've sort of just, their range is shrunken as the, I think it's the ground sloths used to eat them and then drop their seeds all over the place. And without the ground sloths spreading them everywhere, their habitat is shrunk to the size of Joshua tree and a bit of the Mojave. let's see. So I'm not going to get to everybody, and we'll have to save some poems for next time. But we haven't had a Carlton Johnston poem in a while, so let's do that for sure. This is my open mic prompt poem, he says. And this was last week's again, because we ran out of time last week. A woman walks down a dirt road late at night. This is Carlton Johnston. A woman walks down a dirt road late at night. Yes, black is beautiful except when walking in heels. Down an unlit highway, lugging a spent gas can, the darkness is looming. There is death, and yet as she takes another and another step of safety, she is once again renowned, reclaimed, in the resolve to take just one more step over dirt and gravel and rubble, fallen towards the east, where there is the first rays of sunlight peeking through the war-torn haze of morning. Some great lines and rhythms in that. Thanks for sharing that, Carlton. And let's see. Yeah, there's a whole bunch of people left, and I'm not gonna get to everybody. But next week we can do poems that we missed this week. So don't worry about that. I'm just gonna really quickly go to our prompt poems, and Megan didn't have one this week, and mine is short, so we'll be short, and that'll be good. So here's so once again the prompt, which I didn't really read the whole prompt. This was the whole prompt. There we go. You can put me up on the screen too. An aphorism is a concise statement that contains a bit of wisdom or wit about life, such as if it ain't broke, don't fix it, or honesty is the best policy. Write a poem that is either based on an aphorism or contains one or more aphorisms. And so this was my very short poem. It's been a very busy week. This is the two busy times of me for a year, or early April and in like September. The same time, getting the issues together and the contests, like we just announced the winners of the Rattle Chapbook Prize and things like that, plus the taxes. Man, it's been a bear of a week, but it's done. But I gave myself a break and wrote just a short poem in the kind of, Mike White or Wendy Vitalock or Kay Ryan type style. And here it is. This is based on the Friedrich Nietzsche quote, or aphorism, "Some are born posthumously." And of course, Nietzsche was talking about how no one will understand his work until after he's dead, is what he was basically saying. But Nietzsche is just a walking aphorism machine, and all his books are like nothing but aphorisms. So I opened up one of them. I can't remember which one this is from, and just read through and picked one. And this was our short little poem based on an aphorism. Some are born posthumously, Friedrich Nietzsche. Some are born posthumously, but you were born on the day of your birth. You were purple, but briefly, darker in shade and deeper in worth than all of this ball that we sweetly call earth. There's a little rhymey, intense short poem. And now the Sciku for this week is based on this article by it's from the American Psychological Journal, and it is right here, and it says lies that might eventually come true seem less ethical. And what they did is they basically made people they gave them surveys about how unethical a lie was, and whether or not they primed them by thinking about how it might end up coming true at some point, made the people more likely to say that it was ethical. And so there's implications here for social media and just the way that false information spreads around. Like we think, well, it's not really true, but it kind of might be true eventually, or maybe we'll find out that it really is true. Then we're much easier to spread lies that way. And at the same time, there was another article that I happened to read that was from Market Watch. This is kind of a poet response haiku. And this is a sarcastic poem, or a sarcastic story from Market Watch. And at first it took me a while to realize it actually was sarcastic. But, where'd it go? There we go. This is millennials have solved the retirement crisis. And basically they're saying that millennials don't think they have to invest in anything because they're investing in crypto instead. So that's going to work pretty well. And so here is my Sciku really quick just to close out the show. And I put a picture of our own backyard in there as well. So here is the Sciku. Early spring, another craze of tulips buying crypto. Early spring, another craze of tulips buying crypto. That is the Sciku for the week, looking back at the tulip bulb craze, or tulip bulb mania, if you don't know. That's back. It's one of the first market bubbles in mercantilism. When was that? I think 1600s. Right after, once trade got going, they started having tulip bulbs were a symbol of status. So people kept buying these tulip bulbs in exotic colors, and the price for tulip bulbs just rocketed out of control. And people made tons of money getting rich just buying tulips. And then, of course, the bubble burst, and everybody who invested in expensive tulips lost out big, while everybody who bought in early worked out fine. So that is my summation of cryptocurrency, I guess. But it's not, I'm not a lawyer or an investment advisor, so that is not investment advice either. Anyway, that is your show for today. That's the Sciku. And next week's guest is going to be... Oh, wait, let me do the prompt first. Next week's prompt is going to be... let's write a poem about one or each of the 12 Jungian archetypes. The first archetype is the artist. So let's write a poem about one or each of the 12 Jungian archetypes. If you try to do all 12, like I suggest maybe like a haiku sequence or something, or maybe cram all 12 into one poem somehow. So that is your prompt. Write about one or each of the 12 Jungian archetypes. I'm sure there's links all over the place. You can look up what they are. I actually don't know, but it'll be fun to learn about. So that's what I'm going to be doing, and then writing a poem. And now, next week's guest on the Rattlecast is going to be Janice N. Harrington. Oops, that is a typo there. It should say Sunday. It's the regular time, Sunday, April 24th. Janice Harrington is, of course, the poet we interviewed for the current spring issue of Rattle. She was a librarian for a long time, has all that experience, and then went into spoken word storytelling, then went into children's books, and then into poetry as well. Her most recent book is Primitive, but she's got several really great books. And a really interesting person, a lot to talk about with Janice. So it's one of those things where you've read the interview with her if you're a subscriber. If you have any follow-up questions to the interview, write them down and have them prepared for next week. And that's going to be Sunday, don't look at the screen, Sunday, April 24th, the regular time, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 noon Eastern time. That's Sunday, April 24th. Rattlecast number 141 with Janice N. Harrington. Hope to see you there. Hope you have a great week in the meantime, and I will talk to you later. Goodbye.